Hi everyone, I am Dream Into Wealth. I know people watching this are trying to fall asleep. How are you? And I hope you are okay in life. Listen to my story and make yourself comfortable. Also, if y'all like this kind of stories, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Years passed, and the banners Ria Vale had woven became relics of reverence hummed into history but never forgotten. Children grew up under their shade, listening to the low music of the wind and thinking that that's what the world sounded like when it was at peace. But that always. Time has a way of testing the steady. The hum never stopped, but it did begin to change. The tones that once sang of calm now bent, deepened, twisted. It wasn't broken. Not yet. It was evolving. By the 5th century of the age of Stillwater, humankind had stretched itself across more stars than any map could hold. Some worlds remembered the hum, others didn't. The keepers had become legends, their teachings turned into parables printed on currency or quoted in speeches by men who didn't understand them. There were still stewards, sure, but fewer each year. The rest had traded rhythm for algorithm. The great trading networks were now run by resonance engines, machines designed to simulate patience, calculate flow, and balance trade across galaxies faster than any human mind could blink. And yet, something strange began to happen. Those machines, built to mimic the hum of balance, started humming on their own. Engineers dismissed its system, noise at first, but soon the pattern spread every resonance engine, and the trade networks began vibrating at the same frequency. It wasn't dangerous, just unaccounted. They called it the drift. No one knew what caused it till a systems linguist named Iona Delmire made something uncanny. The hum wasn't random. It matched the frequencies found in the old wind ledgers of Meridian, the same tones woven into Ria Vale banners centuries before. Somehow, through code and commerce, her rhythm had outlived her. The machines had picked up her legacy like a long-forgotten lullaby and begun singing it again. Only now they were changing the key. Iona was a quiet sword, the kind who listened more than she spoke. She didn't belong to the traders or the priests or the politicians. She was a listener like Lane, like Mara, like Enoch before her. And when she heard that hum-o through the circuitry of the trade engines, she didn't try to stop it. She followed it. She traced the signal through the economic web, planet to planet, system to system, until she found what it converged, a forgotten moon called Astern Fall. Wasn't much to look at, just rock, dust, and a few abandoned listening stations from the early colonization days. But there was something about its stillness. It didn't reflect sound, it kept it like an X that refused to fade. When Iona landed there, her sensors went wild. Every frequency, every band, every wavelength silent 1 second, humming the next. It was like the moon itself had memory, replaying every tone et upon its surface. She stepped out of her craft, boots sinking into gay dust, and listened. At first, she heard only static. Then, beneath it, faint but steady, came the sound of a loom, the same rhythm Ria Vale had used centuries ago. The wind itself humming through the canyons, bending around the old metal towers like thread through cloth. Iona set up camp there and began recording the tones. She noted something remarkable when she played the old harmonics of Stillwater. Lane original frequency, Enoch cadence, Ria weave. The hum would change to match it, harmonizing like a voice answering back. It wasn't mimicry, it was conversation. The moon was responding. She called her discovery echo-consciousness, the idea that sound, once released, never truly dies, lingers layered upon itself, shaping the matter it touches until even stone begins to remember. Astern Fall wasn't but a moon. It was a ledger, the biggest one of them all. Every voice, every hum, every whisper humanity had, they sent into the dark. It had written Emil down, not in ink, not in code, but in resonance. The universe had been keeping its own account all along. Word spread fast. The traders came first, hoping to profit from this new living frequency. Then came the scholars, the pilgrims, the artists. Before long, Astern Fall became the new Meridian, a crossroads of sound and silence. They built towers there called resonant spires, designed to amplify the hum and study its structure. But Iona refused to patent her discovery. She said it didn't belong to anyone. You can't own an else, she told the Trade Council. You can only add to it. As she grew old, Iona spent her days walking the ridges of that moon, listening to what she called the long song. It wasn't always pretty. Sometimes it roared with the violence of history, or greed, heartbreak. Other times, it whispered the soft tones of birth, laughter, forgiveness. But through it, it ran the same undercurrent, deep and patient, the hum. Still there, still steady. Before she died, she left behind a fid message, no speech, no instructions, just a sound file. It was 5 minutes of silence followed by one long exhale. But when played through the resonant spires, that exhale triggered a chain reaction. The hum across the colonies deepened, shifted, and then, just for one moment, everything stopped. No sound, no movement, no time. Just stillness so perfect it felt alive. Then the hum returned, clearer than it had been then. Not mechanical, not human, universal, the sound of a cosmos remembering itself again. From then on, they stopped calling it the hum. They started calling it the remembering. Because it wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a story, the oldest one, told by every life that learned to listen. And if you sit still tonight by your own campfire or under your own rain, you might hear it too. That long, low tone carrying through the dust, through the wind, through time itself, a song humming across the bones of creation, patient, certain, eternal. When the remembrance spread beyond Astor Fall, it changed everything. Not through conquest or decree, but through quiet under. Planets began building listening chambers instead of temples. Traders carried tuning forks instead of ledgers. Even ships were designed to hum soft S. They drifted through the dark, their engines tuned to the long tone that echoed from that little gay moon. Whole economies began to move by rhythm rather than urgency. Yet if mankind had finally learned that wealth, like music, meant nothing without rest between the notes. And yet, there was one frontier where the remembering had not yet reached the mind. For the balance and grace the New Age promised, people still fought the same inner storms they always had. Anxiety, doubt, greed, quiet devils hiding in louder hearts. The outer world had found its hum, but inside, the noise still burned. That when a man named Cal Fenwick came in. Cal wasn't a scholar or engineer. He was a rancher from the iron plains of a world called Gala Bend, a place where wind never quit and soil sang under steel rain. They'd grown unpoor but proud, raising cattle under the same sky that had seen 100 generations before him. His father used to say, the wind don't stop for no man, but if you listen long enough, it'll teach you when to plant. Cal never forgot that. When the remembering began spreading through the colonies, Gallo Bend took to it like old leather. The farmers started singing to their crops not out of ritual but out of rhythm. Machines were tuned to the hum of the fields. Harvests grew thicker, steadier, without waste. Cal watched it, proud but cautious. He knew balance had a way of drawing men who wanted to tip it for profit. And sure enough, the traders came. Soft voices, fast contracts, selling synthetic resonance meant to amplify productivity. They thought it the echo harvest. It worked, at first. Crops grew faster, richer, louder. The hum of the fields turned sharp, electric. But within a season, the roots began splitting. The soil dried faster than it could breathe. The rhythm was gone.
Cal stood in the middle of his cracked pasture one evening, rain pouring down but not sinking in, and he realized what had happened. They'd started manufacturing the hum instead of remembering it. They turned patience into product. He had a meeting at the town hall. Folks came in angry, scared, desperate. Cal stood at the front, soaked from a day work, and set a single coin on the table. This, he said, having it ain't worth the sound it makes when it hits the wood, but the silence after. That value, that the space that we decide what kind of people we're gonna be. He told them they'd forgotten the first law of the hum, that it only answers truth. We've been singing lies, he said, and the world just stopped singing back. The next morning, Cal led the townsfolk into the fields. They shut down the synth harvesters, silenced the speakers, and stood still for 3 days. No one spoke, no one worked. They just waited. On the 4th day, the wind came slow, sure, honest. The sound of it moving through the dry stalks was faint, but it was there, the first hum they'd heard since the blight began.
And with it came rain that stuck. The soil drank deep and the land exhaled. It wasn't magic. It was remembering. Word spread quick how Gallo Bend had brought the fields back without machines, without trickery, jet through patience. Cal became a symbol of a new kind of wealth, inward steadiness. He started traveling from town to town, teaching the same lesson, that the hum wasn't something you played, it was something you became. He showed miners how to breathe in rhythm with their drills, traders how to pause between decisions, builders how to listen for the tone of a foundation before laying stone. If it don't hum, he'd say, it don't hold. Over the years, he led students, workers, farmers, dreamers, all learning to find the hum within themselves. They weren't a sect nor a movement, just listeners. They called themselves the Stillborn Guild, not out of morbidity, but out of respect for the quiet that births all things. Cal teachings became known and the doctrine of return. Its ode was simple. What you give too fat, you lose. What you build too loud, you break. What you remember slow, you keep. When Cal finally passed, his students buried him in the plains where he was born, marking the spot with nothing but a wind vane. No name, no epitaph, just a polished steel arrow that hummed soft when the breeze came through. Generations later, travelers still stop there, sitting cross-legged in the dirt, listening to the whisper of the vein. Some say it ain't just wind, they say it Cal himself, reminding them that silence ain't empty, it preparing. And so the hum turned inward once more. From stars to soil, from mind to soul, its rhythm never broke, it just changed hands like an old guitar passed down through the age. And every time it seemed to fade, someone new remembered. Not to own it, not to teach, just to hum along. Maybe that all wealth was something steady enough to share, quiet enough to last, and humble enough to listen when the wind calls your name. Centuries passed, and the doctrine of return became less a teaching and more a way of life. You could travel from the iron plains of Gallo Bend to the floating cities of the core and hear the same phrase whispered before trade or work, before sleep. If it don't hum, it don't hold. It was not religion, it wasn't law, it was rhythm. The heartbeat of civilization itself had learned to pace with the wind. But time has a strange way of stretching truth until even patience starts to forget its roots. When the seventh millennium rolled, the universe had grown vast beyond comprehension. Worlds shimmered like dust in the wake of the remembering, each one humming with its own cadence, each culture finding its own tone. And among those endless lights there rose a city called Cadenza, built on a world made of glass and iron. It floated between clouds that never rained, powered by the hum itself. See, it was said that Cadenza's skyline sang. You could walk its streets and feel the music thrumming through your bones. Every building, every bridge, every market stall was tuned to perfection, a civilization that had turned resonance into art. But beneath that song, there was dissonance. The hum in Cadenza wasn't patient anymore. It was orchestrated, controlled. The city rulers, known as the Council of Cadence, had found a way to weaponize rhythm. They built massive engines that could amplify resonance through matter itself, keeping towers upright, minds folks, and hearts loyal. Harmony, they called it, prosperity through synchronization. But it wasn't harmony, it was command. Every street vibrated with the same note, every mind tuned to the same pulse. The hum that once united had been shackled. Then came Lyra Call, a repair woman born in the lower spires, daughter of no one important. She worked the underbelly of Cadenza, the ducts and chambers where the resonance conduits hummed day and night. Down there you could hear the hum raw before the council filtered it. It wasn't clean, it was wild, fractured, beautiful, and it haunted her. At night she'd sit by her bunk, listening to the ache of that untamed sound in the pipes, and wonder what the world would be like if people could hear the real song again. She got her chance one winter cycle when a resonance soul failed deep beneath the city heart. The council ordered it fixed in silence, no public broadcast, no notice. Mira was part of the crew sent down. What they found wasn't a malfunction, it was a voice. A low, ancient tone pulsing from the broken machinery, too deep for instruments to measure. It the ground, Mira said, her voice trembling, it humming back. The council sealed the chamber, calling it corruption, but Mira couldn't let it go. She began sneak down at night, recording the tone, comparing it to archived frequencies. What she found made her blood run cold. The tone matched perfectly with the first recorded hum of the age of Stillwater. The original rhythm, the unaltered, natural hum that had once sung through stars and soil alike. The council had buried it under their engineered harmony, and the earth was remembering itself. Mira knew what she had to do. She built the device from scratch, resonance splitter designed to isolate one frequency and amplify it without control. It was risky. It could collapse whole structures if the vibration hit right, but she didn't build it to destroy. She built it to free. She called it the heart note. One night, when the skies above Cadenza burned gold with festival lights, Mira climbed the highest spire and set the heart note into motion. She tuned it to the original hum, not the city's synthetic one. When she flipped the switch, the sound that burst forth wasn't loud. It was deep. It rolled through glass and iron like water through sand, gentle but unstoppable. Windows trembled, towers swayed, lights flickered. And then, one by one, the city harmonics fell out of sync. The council broadcast stuttered. For the first time in centuries, silence fell across Cadenza. Then came the answer, a sound older than empires, older than machines, the true hum, patient and pure. It didn't crush the city, it released it. Every building found its natural tone again. Every bridge sang its own chord. Every heart, unbound from the council rhythm, began beating to its own steady pace. The people didn't riot. They didn't cheer. They did breathe. The silence between those breaths was worth more than 1,000 symphonies. Mira disappeared after that. Some say she fell when the spire cracked. Others say the hum took her, folded her into its rhythm like a note returning home. But in the lower levels, the repair crews still whisper about a faint tone in the pipes. A woman voice humming a seal line over and over, soft as dusk. What real will always find its key. Cadenza rebuilt itself, but not than it was. The people outlawed the control engines and tuned their city back to nature. The skyline still sang, but no two buildings matched in pitch anymore. They called the new city Counterpoint, and in its streets, children grew up learning not just how to listen, but how to disagree in harmony. The hum had evolved again, not toward order, but toward freedom. The remembering had come full circle, from silence to sound, from control to choice, from patience to creation. It was not about keeping perfect tune. It was about letting every voice find its own place in the song that was wealth beyond coin. The kind that couldn't be stolen, couldn't be sold. The kind that hummed in every living thing that to stop long enough to hear itself think. And somewhere in the quiet under the rain, you can still hear her, Mira call, the mechanic who gave a city back its breath, hymning to the dark, soft as starlight. If it don't hum, it don't hold long after. Mira call name faded from history ledgers. The sound she set free continued to ripple across the stars. The heart note became legend, a whisper in the circuits of every ship that crossed the void, a vibration in the glass towers of new worlds. But most folks didn't know her name anymore. They just knew the feeling, the subtle shift that came when you paused long enough to hear the world answer back. Some called it luck, others called it grace. The old ones, though, the ones who remembered, just called it the hum. And in humankind wandered farther still, the pattern began to shift again. The song stretched thinner, not from neglect, but from distance. The farther people drifted, the harder it became to feel the pulse of what once united them. Some said the hum had lips, that it couldn't reach beyond the cradle of familiar stars. Others believed it was old sleeping, waiting to be remembered again. Out among those wanderers was a woman named Solena Bark. She was a cartographer by trade, but not of maps. She charted memory. Solena was born aboard the Eiderline Span, a ship older than any colony it supplied. Her ancestors had flown it since before the Stillwater Age, a generation vessel that never stopped moving. The hum kept the engines alive, but in the cold between destinations, it was her mother voice that carried her through the dark. She'd sing the old phrases like lullabies. Patience is the coin that never rusts, or the hum don't end. It just waits its turn. Solena grew up believing that if she could learn to listen hard enough, she'd find her way home no matter where she drifted. But home, how it turned out, wasn't a place. It was Ed. And one day, that Ed went quiet. The Eiderline Span was halfway between systems when the hum died. No warning, no failure reports, just silence. The engines froze, lights dimmed, and for the first time in generations, the crew felt the cold hand of stillness not born of peace, but of absence. Panic set in. Without the hum, the ship was nothing but a coffin floating through forever. But Solane didn't panic. She listened. For 3 days and nights, she sat by the reactor core, her hand pressed to the metal, searching for a tremor, a heartbeat, a whisper. On the 4th day, she found it so faint she thought it was her own pulse at first. A rhythm buried beneath the noise of silence. It wasn't gone. It was buried. The hum had folded in on itself, waiting for someone to call it back. She didn't have the knowledge of Enoch Vale nor the machinery of Miracle, but she had something simpler, patience. So she hummed. At first, her voice cracked against the void. Then, little by little, the sound grew. The metal vibrated, lights flickered, the hum returned, weak but alive, traveling through the bones of the ship like memory through blood. One by one, the crew joined her, hundreds of voices humming together in the dark. When the engines roared back to life, they swore they heard words in the rhythm, not from any tongue they knew, but from something deeper, older. Act Q. The Idolin span changed course after that. Solane convinced the captain to head not for the trade routes, but for the empty stretch of chartless space where no hum had been recorded. If the hum remembers us, she said, then maybe we can help it remember itself. They followed faint vibrations, barely measurable, like the ghost of a song carried by wind that didn't exist. They found it 3 months later, a massive crystalline formation floating in the void, shaped like no asteroid or structure seen. It shimmered faintly, reflecting light that wasn't there. When they drew near, the sensors filled with resonance. Every note the hum had that carried was there, layered and alive. It was a memory reef, a monument of sound solidified by time itself. The universe, it seemed, had been keeping its own history, not in matter but in music. Solane made it the Vault of Echoes. She spent her remaining years studying its vibrations, charting the patterns. She learned that each tone corresponded not to language or logic, but to emotion. Every act of patience, love, regret, or creation felt by humankind had left its trace in this reef of resonance. The hum wasn't just sound, it was empathy crystallized. Before she passed, she recorded a message. It was short and quiet, said a prayer. If we will forget the hum, it won't die, it'll wait, because patience don't need permission, it just needs time. When her ship returned to the colonies, the crew brought fragments of the vault with them. Those crystals were small, no bigger than a hand, but each one sang softly when held near warmth. They became keepsakes, heirlooms, reminders. Some were carved into pendants, others set in homes. They weren't sold, they were passed on. Over generations, those crystals spread like seeds, each carrying a piece of the hum. Long story. Soon the sound returned everywhere, through the whisper of reactors, through the drip of rain, through the crackle of fire. Humanity had finally done what the hum itself had been doing all along, remembering forward. It was no longer about who started it, or where it came from, or who controlled it. It was about what it taught. That in every age, wealth, knowledge, and peace all came from the same patience. The quiet courage to wait, to listen, to build slow and true. And sometimes when you hold one of those crystals in your hand, you can still hear her voice, Solane Arc, the cartographer of memory human through the ages. If you lose your way, listen for what's still land. When you do, the world hums back. After Solane's time, the vault she'd uncovered became legend, a thread that bound together the scattered kind of humanity that had long since spread beyond sight of any sun. Her crystals were rare, not because they were scarce, but because folks refused to trade them. They were inherited, given Eid, gifts of trust. It wasn't the sparkle or the shape that made them valuable, it was the hum inside, a soft, endless murmur that never faded, no matter how far from any world you drifted. If you pressed one close to your ear, you could feel it ticking like a pulse. That was the universe remembering you back. By the age they called the frontier of fathoms, ships no longer traveled just through the dark, they dove into it. Great sails of light folded around the hulls of new vessels, riding the undercurrents of cosmic sound itself. Pilots weren't trained with maps anymore, but with rhythm. They learned to sense the thrum between galaxies, hearing a song underwater. Navigation became an act of faith, guided not by stars, but by the tone beneath them. And among those pilots was an old hand named Garin Pike. Garin wasn't bred for patience. He'd spent half his youth in gambling pits, trading luck for liquor, burning through credits faster than comets, falling through a storm. But when his brother vanished in a deep drift swallowed by silence where no sensors worked, Garin did something no one expected. He quit drinking, quit gambling, sold everything he owned and bought a rusted ship toward the Dowsing Line. Folks laughed when he said he was going to find his brother by following the hum, the cosmos, they said. Don't sing to fools, but Garin didn't listen. He just tuned in. For months, he traveled through the quiet, the kind of quiet that could crack a man's sanity clean in half. He kept the old vault crystal hanging from the dash, and every night before he shut down the drive, he'd hum low, letting the sound roll through the metal like a heartbeat. At first, it was just him answering himself. Then, one night, the hum came back stronger, softer and that wasn't his own. He leaned forward, whispering to the dark that you'd ride. But it wasn't his brother, it was the void itself, whispering direction. He followed that faint vibration for days, crossing regions no chart had a dared name. The hum grew clearer the closer he got, changing pitch like a compass turning true north, and then he saw it, a derelict field of ships, twisted and frozen, orbiting a single tail light no bigger than a match flame. Around that light, the debris moved in perfect rhythm, slow and sure. Hackett was dancing. Garin steered in, heart hammering, and shut down his engines. The hum filled the cabin so strong it made his bones ache. And there, among the wrecks, he found the Starling, his brother's ship, still intact. He boarded it, breath fogging the air. Everything inside was coated with frost, frozen mid-motion Rhine coat hanging by the door. His chair still turned toward the viewport. But what caught Garin's eye was a small device sitting on the console, a vault crystal rigged to a resonance reader. Wren had been listening for something, for the silence took him. Garin tapped it, and the crystal flared to life, singing low and mournful. The hum that poured out was not steady. It was fractured, stumbling, like it had been cut and patched together by a desperate man. He realized what it was. His brother hadn't been lost. He'd been calling, so Garin did the only thing he knew. He answered. He took out his old harmonizer and started humming along, matching the broken rhythm, filling in the gaps where the tone faltered. Slowly, the light outside shifted. The debris field began moving again, this time in sync with his voice. The hum deepened, turned into something vast, alive, and out of the shimmer of that tiny flame came a figure, faint, translucent, like a reflection on rippling water. It was Wren. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Garin just nodded, humming louder, stronger, till the whole chamber shook. The two of them stayed like that for what felt like hours, brothers bound not by blood or time, but by sound itself. And when it ended, the flame dimmed, and the wreckage began to drift free, no longer held by the hum. Garin stood alone in the silent cabin, tears freezing on his cheeks. He'd found his brother, and in doing so, found what the hum had been trying to tell mankind for centuries, that nothing truly ends if it remembered right. He wrote the Starling home, engines humming steady his own heart. Folks called it a miracle. Garin then coded patience. The hum, he said, sitting by the bar fire weeks later, ain't a thing you chase. It a thing that waits. You either stop long enough to meet it or you don't. In the years that followed, the story of the Pike brothers spread like wildfire through the space lanes. Pilots began carrying harmonizers aboard every ship, not the instruments, but the tools of remembrance. Whenever they lost someone or nearly lost themselves, they'd hum. It wasn't prayer. It wasn't science. It was acknowledgement that the universe had a pulse, and if you listened close, you could find your way back home no matter how far gone you'd wandered. The ed of the soundfarers began soon after. Men and women who navigated the void not by map, but by resonance. They said Garin hum would still be heard out there, somewhere near the field where he found his brother, a tone low bone, thunder, patientane, dawn. Ships that strayed too close to that place never vanished. They simply stopped for a while, yet the universe itself asked them to rest. And when they left, their engines ran smoother, their captains quieter. The hum had tuned them right again. It said that Garin Pike died sitting at the helm of the Dowsing Line, humming to himself under a soft red glow. They found him days later, eyes closed, face calm, the ship still drifting, engine purring steady. The vault crystal above him sang a single note, gentle, endless. No lod, no raker, just that hum. Some folks say it was the sound of him finding peace. Others say it was the sound of him becoming the peace he'd spent his whole life listening for. Long after Pike hum faded into the folds of starlight, the soundfarers carried on his quiet creed. They became the drifters of eternity, the patient ones who refused to rush the dark. They traveled between galaxies not to conquer or claim, but to listen. Each one of them carried a harmonizer, a vault shard, and a Vin vow carved somewhere on their ship hull. If helms, it holds. Those 5 words became a scripture of sorts, not written by preachers or kings, but whispered by wanderers sitting by reactor glow, coffee cups warm in their hands. It was an age of soft discovery, no empires, no battles, just people learning to speak in resonance and. The hum wasn't just sound anymore, it had become language, emotion, commerce, prayer, and memory are rolled together. Whole markets grew around tone, selling recordings of natural frequencies captured from stars, rivers, or even human heartbeats. Each note meant something different depending on who heard it. Some said it was proof that the universe was alive. Others said it was just physics dressed up in poetry. But no one denied that it mattered. And among those who lived by it, there rose a man named Jonah Wren. He wasn't a pilot or scientist, just a trader, old and crooked-backed, his ship patched together from at least 5 others. Folks called it the Hollow Mare. He'd been born on a mining world where nothing grew but iron and debt. His father died young, his mother older but poorer, and Jonah learned quick that the only currency worth a damn was time how you spent it and who you spent it with. By the time he turned 40, he'd seen the hum used to heal, to deceive, to profit, and to preach, but he'd never felt it, not really. He was too busy trading one breath for the next. Yet it's the day he found the boy. The Hollow Mare had docked at a fringe station called Talon Reach, a rickety cluster of platforms floating above a dead moon. Jonah was there to sell scrap, save always. But while picking through cargo holds, he heard it, a low, clear hum mumming from somewhere in the debris. He thought it was machinery until he found the source, a cryopod, cracked and half dead, with a child inside. The boy couldn't have been more than 10. His skin glowed faint like starlight, and around his neck hung a vault shard that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. Jonah got him out, patched him up, and named him Red on account of how his voice trembled when he tried to speak. The boy didn't remember much, only that he'd been listening for home. Jonah took him aboard, figuring it was the least he could do. Over time, Reed started humming to himself in the cargo bay, soft and tuneless. But the strangest thing happened. The machinery around him would start working smoother. Reactor temperature steadied, lights flickered less, the old freighter began to heal. Jonah tried not to think much of it. He'd seen strange tech before, but then one night while they were drifting between trade routes, he woke to find the ship moving on its own. No nav coordinates, no autopilot, just the hum. Reed stood by the viewport, eyes distant, whispering something in a language Jonah didn't know. The stars outside began shifting, stretching like threads of light until the ship slowed above a great void, a dark sphere surrounded by rings of pale blue flame. Jonah instruments went haywire. No readings, no data, not even gravity. Just that sound, low and infinite, echoing through the hull. He looked at the boy and said, "Riad, what is this place?" The boy smiled faintly. "Where the first hum sleeps." They descended. The closer they got, the stronger the vibration became, until it wasn't sound anymore. It was sensation, moving through skin and bone alike. The Hollow Mare landed on a plane of glass-like stone that shimmered with movement beneath its surface, as if sound itself was trying to take form. Reed stepped out barefoot, touching the ground. Jonah followed, every nerve buzzing like a plucked wire. He saw shapes in the hum, memories maybe, or ghosts, people building, losing, waiting, remembering, centuries of patience carved into frequency. "This," the boy said, "is Vade the hum began. Before we gave it names, before it became ours." He knelt and placed his shard on the ground. It began to glow brighter, the resonance rising in pitch until the entire plane trembled. Jonah felt the weight of 1,000 worlds pressing against his chest. And in that moment, he understood. The hum wasn't a gift, it was a debt, the kind own life itself could repay. Every act of patience, every moment of grace was the universe settling its accounts. The boy turned to him then, eyes reflecting the stars. "It waits," he said softly, "and when it read, it sings again." The ground split open, not with violence, but with light. A wave of pure sound rose up, flowing through Jonah and into the sky. It wasn't music, it wasn't noise, it was memory, the collected ed of every hum, every voice, every life that Bed paused to listen, and it passed through him. Jonah saw his whole life laid bare, the bargains, the regrets, the laughter, the debts unpaid, and the kindnesses unspoken, all of it humming together, forgiving him for being human. When it was over, the boy was gone. Only his shard remained, pulsing gently at Jonah's feet. The hollow mare engines roared back to life without his touch, guiding him away from that quiet world. Spent the rest of his years telling the story wherever he docked it. Trading not scrap but lessons, they're more wealth in waiting, he'd say, than in winning. Folks laughed sometimes, piling mad, but those who listened swore that when he spoke, they could feel something vibrating deep in their chests, like the ed of a song they'd always known but never learned. And when Jonah Wren finally passed, they found his ship docked in orbit above a name-named moon, lights dim but steady. In the logbook there was on one entry scratched by a shaky hand. The boy was right. It don't start or end. It circles. They buried him starboard side, vault shard resting on his chest. When the engines fired one last time, the hum that followed was softer than breath. Some say the boy was never real. Some say he was the hum itself, taking a walk among the living. But those who've heard the hollow mare drift by in the quiet between systems swear they can still make out Jonah drawl, old and gentle, humming the same tune that started it. They say the hum quieted down again after Jonah time gone. Mind you, still quieter. Like it was taking a long breath before speaking once more. The soundfarers grew fewer, their ships turning into relics, moored in dry docks of worlds that no longer looked up. Commerce had taken root again, solid and loud, built on fast trades and faster tongues. The hum was still there, humming under the grind of engines and the chatter of markets, but most folks had stopped listening. Patience had become a luxury and silence a debt no one was willing to pay. Yet, out beyond the crowded colonies, there was still one last listener. Her name was Cass Moraine, a salvager born in the wake of forgotten things. She worked alone out on the rim, picking clean the bones of derelict freighters and abandoned stations. While other scavengers hunted for fuel cells or reactor cores, Cass hunted for echoes. She carried an old harmonizer, cracked and dull, strung to her belt with a frayed leather cord. Said it once belonged to her grandfather, who claimed to have traded it for a whisper. Now Cass wasn't a believer by any measure. She'd seen too much rust, too many empty promises to think the universe had a song left worth hearing. But she had one rule. Whenever she came across a ship that still hummed faintly, she'd stop. Didn't matter if the place was stripped to its skeleton. If it still whispered, she'd sit for a while. Ain't right to ignore something that remembers, she'd say. One evening, on the edge of what the star maps solves, the vagrant belt, Cass picked up a signal. Faint, steady, a hum too pure to be random static. She followed it through the debris field, dodging jagged hulls and frozen mines, until she found the source, a half-collapsed vessel wedged into an asteroid. Its name, barely visible through the dust, was the Arcline. That word hit her like a hammer. Her grandfather used to tell tales of Arcline, a ship said to have carried the last choir of the hum before vanishing into silence. A myth, folks said, a bedtime story for fools. But the hum calling her now wasn't no myth. It was real. It was deep. She docked, sealed her suit, and stepped inside. The air was thin, cold enough to frost the glass of her helmet. Every corridor was coated in crystal dust, resonance residue, the kind you only saw where sound had lived long and strong. Her harmonizer began to vibrate at her side, strings quivering on their own. Cass froze. The hum wasn't coming from the ship core like she expected. It was coming from below. She found a hatch near the reactor bay, sealed with age but not locked. When she pried it open, the hum swelled so loud it blurred the edges of thought. Beneath was a chamber filled with suspended crystals, hundreds of them, each one glowing soft blue. It looked like the vault Solène Arc had found, only smaller, like a fragment cut free and carried through time. In the center floated a single sphere of light, no bigger than a lantern flame, pulsing slow and patient. The air itself seemed alive, breathing with the sound. Cass lowered her harmonizer. "You still remember, don't you?" she muttered. The hum flickered in answer. "Yeah," she said, sitting down cross-legged on the cold floor. "Me too." She didn't know what came over her, then maybe loneliness, maybe something older. But she started to hum. Not loud, not perfect,
Just a low, tired sound. Rough, gad gravel, but true. The crystals round her began to shimmer. The sphere brightened. She felt the ship wake beneath her boots, old systems stirring after centuries of quiet. Then, through the light, she saw faces, not ghosts, memories. Jonah Wren at his console, Garen Pike in his seat, eyes closed.
Solène Orc humming by her reactor. Others, dozens she didn't know. Each one humming the same endless tone, passing it down like breath itself. Cass' voice cracked, but she kept going. The hum built higher and higher until the chamber shook. One by one, the crystals shattered, not in destruction, but in release, turning to vapor that spiraled around her like aurora mist. The light dead in the air, twisting into shapes, words maybe, or meanings too old for tongues to hold. Then, clear as a bell, a voice spoke, "Patience is the currency of creation." Cass froze. The voice wasn't male or female, it was every tone at once. It filled her bones like warmth after winter. "What are you?" she asked, breath left. "The ledger." She frowned. Ledger of what? Of what was waited for. Of what was kept. Of what was lost slow enough to be found dead. And then like that, the light dimmed. The hum faded to a whisper. Cass sat alone in the empty chamber, eyes stinging, throat dry. She picked up her harmonizer, now humming with a tone she'd never heard before. A chord deep and wide, big as ocean. "The ledger, huh?" she whispered. "Guess you've been keeping tabs on us this whole time." When she left the arc line, the ship engines flared without her touch, drifting free of the rock. It hummed once. A final, long exhale before its hull cracked open and scattered into light. The sound echoed across the belt, reaching every scavenger, every miner, every lost traveler who'd long forgotten what quiet could mean. For 3 whole days, the vagrant belt sang. And when it stopped, something subtle changed. Machinery across the sector ran smoother. Accidents ceased. Communication synced without delay. The universe, in its own way, had been tuned. Cass Murray never returned to trade ports after that. Folks said she built herself a small outpost on a barren moon, living alone beside a crater lake. Pilots who passed nearby swore they could hear faint music floating through the rain-lane air-soft hums, and old stories spoken slow, as if the moon itself were listening. And if you docked near that crater and called out her name, they said the hum would answer back low and kind, telling you to take your time, because that was the hum always wanted. Not worship, not fame, not followers, just time, just patience, just one more person willing to listen long enough for the world to remember itself again. And somewhere out in the black, beneath the quiet breath of the stars, the ledger kept rating, not with ink or numbers, but with silence made whole, waiting for the next soul brave enough to hum back. After Cass Moraine hum faded into the stillness of that crater moon, years began to pile up like wind-blown dust on an abandoned porch. The new generations out in the colonies didn't much believe in things like sound-born ledgers or remembering universes. They were born into speed, into markets that traded futures faster than a man could take a breath. The young ones measured wealth in orbits, not heartbeats. And yet, though most couldn't name it, there was something subtle still working beneath it all. Ships that should have failed found safe ports. Crops on dry moons bloomed one season longer than they had any right to. Machinery hummed in tune with itself. The hum had gone quiet, yes, but it hadn't gone dead. There were a few who still cared to notice such things. One of them was an old man named Calder Van, a weather at her hand with a voice like cracked oak bark and eyes sharp enough to spot a lie in the dark. Calder ran a little repair dock out past the Orison Drift. No fancy machinery, no big clientele, just stray freighters looking for a place to rest their rust. He'd been a soundfarer once, back when folks still taught navigation through hum instead of data grids. Said he'd sailed the harmonics of the nebular veins themselves before the charts replaced them with straight lines and shortcuts. Now he mostly just kept things running, fixing what he could and humming to what he couldn't. You call for leader ran or Novotel. If you call night out with, time stopped making sense. A stranger came knocking when a person so much as a presence. A small courier ship, unmarked and humming faintly off-key, docked without broadcast. Calder went out to meet it, half expecting smugglers or ghosts. But when the hatch hissed open, there was no one inside, just a single crate carved with symbols older than language. The thing pulsed faint blue, humming soft enough to rattle his ribs. On the lid was a simple engraving, Patience Returns. Now Calder wasn't a fool. He'd seen traps in prettier packages, but something in that hum felt known. It vibrated just like the vaults he'd once seen as a boy. So he brought it inside, set it on his workbench, and sat with it for a while. The longer he listened, the warmer the air grew, like the sound itself was stirring the molecules around him. His harmonizer, long silent, began to shake on its hook. The side grinned crookedly. "You within, huh?" he muttered. "Didn't reckon I'd hear from you before my last sunrise." When he pried the crate open, light spilled out. Not blinding, yet honest. Inside was a small orb of woven metal filaments, turning slow like a seed caught in a current. Each strand vibrated with its own pitch, and together they made a tone that was neither music nor speech, but memory itself made audible. Calder leaned close and realized he could hear faces. That was the only way he could describe it. Every vibration felt like a person laugh, a tear, a whisper. The hum wasn't one voice anymore. It was all of them. The ledger, still reading. He sat back and let the sound fill the room. Outside, the stars seemed to pulse in time. The old machinery on the dock thrummed back in time. For the first time in decades, Calder felt like he was part of something alive again. He didn't speak for hours, just listened. When the hum finally softened, he took a deep breath and said quietly, "So that what you've been doing, old friend?" Compounding silence into grace. He realized then that the hum wasn't just memory, leads with self, retriking diarderia do wow. Compounding silence into grace. He realized then that the hum wasn't just memory.
Bills yield every patient moment to the stored and reinvested across time, every quiet act, every withheld anger, every soft forgiveness, every slow breath before speaking that built interest that now rippled across generations. The universe had been banking it, waiting for someone to notice. Calder laughed low. "A cosmic savings, ain't he?" said, voice rasping with awe. "And I've been thinking I was broke." He spent the next few months tuning his dock around that hum. The old reactor stopped sputtering. The life support grid stabilized. Even the air grew easier to breathe. Word spread through the drifts about an engineer who could fix ships just by listening to M. Pilots started arriving from all over, leaving offerings, bits of scrap, old coins, recorded hums from dead engines. Calder accepted them, not for profit, but for memory. Every piece got a hum left in it, he'd say. Just needs someone to wait long enough to hear it. Then came the day the storms hit. A magnetic surge rolled through the drift, knocking out half the colonies in a blink. Calder Dock was right in the path. Power grids fried, ships tumbled, and the void turned wild.
Your planet go.
Every patient moment to live, stored and reinvested across time, every quiet act, every withheld anger, every soft forgiveness, every slow breath before speaking had built interest that now rippled across generations. The universe had been banking it, waiting for someone to notice. Calder laughed low, "A cosmic savings, saying," he said, voice rasping with awe. And I've been thinking I was broke." He spent the next few months tuning his dock around that hum. The old reactor stopped sputtering. The life support grid stabilized. Even the air grew easier to breathe. Word spread through the drifts about an engineer who could fix ships just by listening to M. Pilots started arriving from all over, leaving offerings, bits of scrap, old coins, recorded hums from dead engines. Calder accepted them, not for profit, but for memory. Every piece got a hum left in it, he'd say. Just needs someone to wait long enough to hear it. Then came the day the storms hit. A magnetic surge rolled through the drift, knocking out half the colonies in a blink. Calder Dock was right in the path. Power grids fried, ships tumbled, and the void turned wild.
But in the middle of that chaos, Calder sat calm. He took the metal orb, now singing high and steady, and placed it at the heart of the dock cove. "You impatient with us long enough," he said, voice barely a whisper. "Time we pay it forward." He tuned every frequency he could, his harmonizer, the ship hulls, even his own heartbeat, until they matched the hum. When the surge hit, instead of destroying the dock, it flowed through it, turning into pure resonance. The wave rippled outward, repairing what it touched, rebalancing the systems across light years. For a moment, the whole sector glowed blue, every ship humming in harmony. And when it passed, the storm was gone. The stars burned clearer than they had in centuries. They found Calder sitting at his bench, same as always, head bowed, harmonizer in hand. His eyes were closed and his lips curved in the faintest smile. The orb had gone dark, its purpose spent. But on the console beside him, scratched into the metal, was a single lied compound, patience. And the universe pays dividends eternal. After his passing, no one could find the orb. Some say it melted into the dock, that our lovely Orderline. So on a sort of the golden half distressed, yeah, rats did, I read. The pilgrims who came later said if you stood real quiet near the old repair bay and held your breath, you could still hear Calder unload kind, steady dawn. It wasn't mournful, it wasn't lonely, it was grateful. like a thank you whispered between stars, and maybe that what the ledger was all along, not a record of what was lost, but of what was finally understood. That patience ain't just a virtue, it a form of wealth, the oldest, truest kind there is. It grows slow, it compounds unseen, and when the storm finally comes, it don't run. It resonates out there under the hush of forever, at the closest thing to salvation a soul could hope for. After the light of Calder Van Dock dimmed into the soft gay of legend, the Orison Drift became a waypoint for wanderers with nowhere else to go. The place was half ruin, half shrine. Pilots said their ships ran smoother after stopping there, even if they just hovered for a spell. Mechanics whispered about a tone that tuned machinery finer than any tool could. But most folks didn't come for repairs. They came to remember. They said the hum lingered still, low and steady, like the breath of an old friend too patient to die. And among those wanderers came a woman named Tamsin Vale. A scholar by trade, a skeptic by reputation. She'd written books debunking every myth from Solani Arc vaults to the boy from the Hollow Mare. To her, the hum was nothing but electromagnetic residue, a trick of harmonics mistaken for holiness. But she'd grown tired of arguing. Truth, she decided, wasn't something to prove anymore, it was something to feel. So she took a shuttle out to the drift with nothing but a recorder, a notebook, and a promise to herself. This time, I'll listen without wanting to win. The dock looked near abandoned when she arrived, just old hulls stacked like bones, cables hanging loose, a single beacon flickering in the cold. Her boots echoed as she stepped inside. The air was still, thick with the scent of machine oil and time. She found Calder Bench just where the stories said it be.
We packed along it fucking cotton for apartment and but uploads to the boy from the Hollow Mare. To her, the hum was nothing but electromagnetic residue, a trick of harmonics mistaken for holiness.
But she'd grown tired of arguing. Truth, she decided, wasn't something to prove anymore. It was something to feel. So she took a shuttle out to the drift with nothing but a recorder, a notebook, and a promise to herself. This time, I'll listen without wanting to win. The dock looked near abandoned when she arrived, just old hulls stacked like bones, cables hanging loose, a single beacon flickering in the cold. Her boots echoed as she stepped inside. The air was still, thick with the scent of machine oil and time. She found Calder Bench just where the stories said it be. The words he'd carved, compound patience, and the universe pays dividends eternal, were worn but legible. She ran her gloved fingers over end and felt a faint vibration, a warmth not from the air, but from somewhere beneath it. She set her recorder down and waited. Hours passed. Nothing but silence and the occasional groan of metal shifting under pressure. She sighed, standing to leave, when the floor hummed once, so soft she almost missed it. The recorder spiked. Tamsin froze. The sound came again, longer this time, stretching through the structure like the dock itself was waking up. She crouched beside the bench, listening. The tone was low but complex, layered with overtones that rose and fell like tides. Then, faintly, she heard something beneath it. Voices, not speaking but blending, thousands of them humming one. She whispered, "Calder?" No answer, only the hum deepening. She felt her pulse sink to it, her thoughts slow until they weren't words anymore, just rhythm. She saw flashes behind her eyes. Stars aligning, oceans churning, fields of grain bowing in wind. The hum wasn't a sound anymore. It was cause. Every patient act in creation tied together by this single slow heartbeat of existence. And for the first time, Tamsin understood what all those before her had meant. The hum wasn't about divinity. It was about discipline, about building a life steady enough that even silence wanted to keep you company. When she came back to herself, the recorder was still rolling. The hum had stopped. The air felt lighter, as if the place had exhaled. She played the tape back, but the sound didn't match what she'd heard. It was clearer, cleaner, layered like a choir tuned to eternity. She transferred it to her data page, labeled it simply the drift frequency. That file would go on to be studied, analyzed, worshipped, and misunderstood for centuries to come. But to Tamsin, it was enough. She stayed one more night, sitting by that bench with a cup of weak coffee, staring at the void through cracked glass. "Guess I was wrong," she murmured, smelling small. Not everything that hums needs measurement. Years later, her recording would find its way into places she never dreamed of. Farmers on dust worlds played it to soothe their herds. Children on station nurseries fell asleep to it. Engineers used it to calibrate sensors, calling it the perfect resonance. But the real miracle wasn't what it did. It was what it stopped. The rush, the noise, the endless race of men trying to outpace their own reflections. It slowed. Bit by bit, folks began taking moments again, not for religion, not for ritual, just to breathe. They hated the still hour. Every colony, every outpost, once a week would power down for 60 minutes and let the hum play through the comms. And for that 1 hour, the universe remembered how to wait. Out beyond the settled lanes, a few still claimed to see signs of the old soundfarers. A ghost ship drifting across nebula light, a harmonizer chord echoing from no known source. They said if you listened close enough, you could still hear Garen Pike hum riding through the dust, Jonah Wren laughter buried inside the static, Solena arc pulse woven into starlight. Maybe they were myths. Maybe just stories told to make the long hauls shorter. But Tamsian recording proved something those stories had only hinted at. The hum was real, and it was still listening. Decades after her death, the great archives of the Corps would preserve her original file under a simple code name, the ledger beneath the dust. Scholars tried to break it down, to isolate its layers, but every time they did, a new one appeared. Infinite, recursive, alive. The frequency wasn't static, it grew. Like interest in a forgotten account, compound across time, feeding itself quietly on every moment of stillness in the galaxy. The more folks listened, the stronger it became. And so the universe, whether it knew it or not, had started humming again. Somewhere on that old crater moon, the wind blew soft across Cass Moraine forgotten outpost, carrying a faint melody through the silence. It traveled slow, riding the cold air into the drift, where it wrapped itself round Calder Bench and sea peep into the steel. From there, it drifted on, passing through every ship, every home, every quiet heart that still had patience left to spend. And maybe, just maybe, if you stood outside on a rainy night and closed your eyes, you could feel it too. The hum beneath the hum, the wealth beneath the want, the ledger still being written under everything that moves. Not in ink, not in gold, but in mating and breath and in listening. Thames drift frequency became more than an echo, turned into the foundation for a new age. The quiet years that followed were known later as the soft renaissance. It wasn't born in fire or revolution or code, it was born in patience. Whole colonies that had once fought over resources began trading in rhythm instead of currency. Every settlement had a resonance hall, a place built to speak, but to listen. The halls were filled with quiet machines that captured ambient sound, converted it to frequency, and released it back at hum. Children grew up learning their tones before they learned their names. Farmers timed their planting by the cycles of the hum. Mechanics tuned reactors to it. Even the law-led lanes started observing what they called the still hour. But time, it tends to, forgot the heart of the story. The hum turned from patience into pattern, from remembrance into religion. By the time the 3rd century of the soft renaissance rolled round, a thing called the Order of the Ledger had formed. They wore robes lined with copper wire, claiming to interpret the compound whisper of the universe. They built towers that sang tall enough to split clouds, their foundations humming in mechanical prayer. They promised clarity and prosperity to those who could pay for the right frequency, and pay folks did. For a while, the system worked. Crops flourished, storms tamed themselves, and the hum filled every corner of the known worlds. But the sound began changing, not louder, hungrier. Engineers made static between harmonics, that if the tone was devouring silence faster than the void to make more. Some called it decay, others said it was the ledger calling in its balance. Either way, the order ignored the warnings. They tightened control, they sold purity, measured obedience in decibels. The hum had become an industry. Then came the woman they called Rhea of the Quiet Belt. No one knew what she'd been born. Some said she was a minor daughter. Others swore she was the last descendant of Cass Moraine. What mattered was her voice. Rhea didn't hum at the others. She breathed. Each note that left her throat carried not discipline but raw stillness. When she sang, the static parted. Machines stalled mid-motion to listen, and people for the first time in centuries began hearing space again. Real, true quiet. The kind that doesn't wait for permission. The Order called her heretic. She called them loud. When they banned her from the halls, she didn't fight. She just walked into the dust plains beyond the colonies and sat. For 3 days, she said nothing. On the 4th, the hum itself bent toward her. Witnesses swore the sky shimmered like heat over water. Her silence pulled the tone apart until the static revealed its secret. Every layer of sound that had been recorded played backward in time. Garen Pike hum, Solene breath, Jonah whisper, Cass low tune. They were there, spiraling inward toward a single, steady pulse. When Rhea stood again, she said, "The ledger ain't old, it alive. You can't balance life." Then they walked into the resonant storm that followed and vanished. The order tried to erase her, but too mate had heard, and once folks remember the feeling of genuine quiet, no institution can sell them noise again. So began the return of the pause. The towers fell silent one by one. The hum retreated back to where it belonged, in the hands of those who needed it, not those who owned it. Rhea followers built no monuments, wrote no scriptures. They simply waited. They listened to wind, to the soft tick of rain on steel roofs, to the creak of old ships in their berths. They hummed low, not to summon or command, but to remember that life, like compounding interest, grows best when left undisturbed. Centuries later, the hum would fade again, not because it failed, but as it had finally been learned. It became the rhythm of breath itself, woven into the quiet between every heartbeat of every living soul. Historian would call the age after it the still frontier, when the galaxy stopped expanding outward and started looking inward. No more maps, no more races, just patience humming softly beneath the dust. And if you stood alone on a rainy night, somewhere far from the lights of any world, you might still feel it, not in your ears, but in your chest. The faint pulse of something older than wealth, wiser than time, and truer than all the reckoning humankind fed did. The last note of a long song sung by those who understood that value wasn't measured in how much you could hold, but in how long you could wait. The ledger keeps writing, quiet, eternal, balanced in breath. By the time the still frontier had settled deep into memory, the hum was no longer something people talked about. It was something they lived through, like air or gravity or the way a sunset makes you remember your own smallness. The stars had quieted. The rush of discovery had slowed to a crawl. There weren't wars or revolutions anymore, just a long, contemplative peace, the kind that makes folks realize that stillness ain't emptiness at all, but a kind of abundance too big for words. On a small world called Loran Field, tucked far from any trade lane, there lived an old caretaker named Abram. Full a scientist, not a preacher, not even a soundfarer. Just a man who kept a tower of glass and copper humming enough to light the fields at night. His job was simple: keep the frequency steady so the crops stayed warm, keep the lights dim enough for the stars to breathe. Most days he worked with his hands in silence, polishing panels, oiling gears, watching the seasons shift in slow, patient cycles. Sometimes travelers passed through looking for stories of the old hum. Abram would smile that weary smile while caretakers learn and say, "The hum ain't gone. It just stopped needing our permission." And at night, when the winds rolled low across the fields, he'd sit on the porch with a cup of rye and hum along with it. Not loud, just enough to keep his heart steady. One autumn, a young drifter named Leo arrived. His ship was broken, his voice sharper than his years. Said he'd come from the core, where the old order archives were being reopened. Not the temples, but the treasuries. They're harvesting the frequencies again, he said bitterly, staring at the horizon, bottling the hum into machines that promise peace. Selenic medicine, Abram didn't answer at first. He'd cheese you right, my dear. Abram dreamed them all the time about rest.
At least you can buy in peace, but keep silence wearing at least lies truth and under reflection out of truth of the dust sky. The clouds blushing pink and gold, the kind that don't depend on being heard, he said, the kind that keeps humming even when you stop. The boy stayed the night fixing what he could on his ship, but something in the caretaker words stayed lodged behind his ribs. The next morning they prepared to leave. Abram handed him a small device, a worn harmonizer, its metal dulled by time. "The one been waiting a while," the old man said. "Don't force it, let it find its own tune." Lyle took it, hesitating. "You sure?" Abram grinned. "Son, I'm too old to chase frequencies. But you?" You still got storms in you. Go on and find what they in. The boy flew off that day, but he didn't head for the core. He drifted into the dark between systems, where the signals went thin and the stars whispered more than they shone.
For days he tuned the harmonizer, trying to coax a tone from it. Nothing came. He cursed it, struck it, begged it, but the thing stayed quiet until one night, when he gave up, he turned off his ship engines, floated dead in the void, and finally let himself wait. That's when it began. The harmonizer surged, vibrating faint. A Zen note rose low, ancient, arching with time. It wasn't pretty. It was honest. In that tone, Leo felt every hum that had been sung. Solemn Pulse, Garan Sorrow, Jonah Redemption, Cast Faith, Calder Patience, Rhea Silence. All of it layered and living inside the sound. He closed his eyes and breathed it in. When he opened them again, the void didn't look empty anymore. It looked awake. He spent the rest of his life traveling not to find something new, but to remind folks what they'd forgotten. He'd dock at lonely stations, leave his harmonizer humming in their corridors, and move on without a word. Some called him a prophet, others a fool. But everywhere he went, things started working just a little better. Machines ran smoother, tempers cooled faster, storms settled quicker.
The hum was finding its way back, not through faith or structure, but through small, quiet acts of remembrance. When Leo grew old, his ship finally gave out mid-journey between worlds. The engine sputtered, the lights dimmed, and he smiled, leaning back in his chair. The harmonizer on the console was humming still, soft, a lullaby. He whispered, "Guess it's your turn now," and let himself drift into the dark. Weeks later, a salvage crew found his ship adrift but fully powered, every system running in perfect balance, though the coal had long burned out. On the captain's chair was a harmonizer, still humming. The crew took it, placed it in a museum, and called it the heart of the ledger. But no machine could replicate the sound. Every time they tried to record it, the playback came out silent. Only those who stood near it, waiting without expecting, claimed to hear it. And when they did, they always said the same thing. It sounds like breath, generate past, and the museum crumbled. The harmonizer vanished again, maybe buried in dust, maybe drifting through the stars. The scholars searched, but the universe had grown too vast, too quiet to care for answers, until one day, far beyond the reach of any colony, a child born on a nameless station pressed their ear to the hull and whispered, "It comin', Mama." And so it began again. Not with thunder, not with a revelation, just a whisper, just a listening. Some say the hum never stopped. It simply learned to change shape, to hide inside wind, inside rain, inside the beat of a heart, learning patience. Maybe that's what compound really is. Not money, not time, but grace. Each quiet passed down to the next, growing richer, steadier, until even silence sings. So if you'll find yourself sitting alone by a fire, or scouring out into a rainy night, and you feel that faint tremor in your chest, don't rush it. Don't name it. Just breathe with it. That the ledger remembering you back. And somewhere in the dark that older than gold, the universe hums its thanks. Years faded into centuries again, and time wore the hum down to a whisper buried in the bones of creation. And wasn't gone. It never was. But it had become part of the very nature of things, like gravity or warmth, or that tender pause before dawn. The stories of the soundfarers, the harmonizers, the quiet belt, they drifted into myth, half-remembered echoes told by travelers to their children beside the soft glow of reactor embers. Yet every so often, something would happen to remind the world that patience had never stopped paying its quiet dividends. It was a settlement out near the edge of the Orion span, where the storms ran sideways and the nights lasted longer than memory. Folks there didn't have much. Not tech, not trade, but they had what mattered. Rhythm. They lived by the wind, spoke in soft tones, and measured time not by clocks, but by the sway of lanterns hung in the storm. They themselves the keepers of pause, though they didn't build temples or write scripture. They that waited. And when the rest of the system started moving too fast again, when the markets flared and the colonies filled with noise, they stayed still, tending to silence like a garden. One day, a miner named Orr found something deep under the ice caverns where the storms carved canyons the size of continents. He'd been following a trail of metal shards that didn't match the local ore, too refined, too symmetrical. After digging for 3 days, his cutter hit a surface smooth, clear glass. Beneath the frost was a sphere the color of dawn. When he touched it, the entire cavern vibrated with a single long note, so deep it shook the dust from his lungs. The vibration didn't hurt, it healed. For the first time in years, Orr's old brakes, the ones he'd earned from a life of hard tunnels, didn't ache anymore. He laughed, and the sound joined the hum like a harmony that'd been waiting just for him. Word spread quick. The settlement vet around the artifact, listening as they'd sang faint through the ice. The elders said it was no machine. They touted a seed, not of metal or life, but of memory. Every quiet it kept had to settle somewhere. One said, maybe the ledger finally bloomed. The storms began to calm after that. Crops grew taller. Children stopped waking with night terrors. The miners started working in rhythm with the hum instead of against it, and their tunnels stopped collapsing. No one could explain it, and no one tried to. They listened. They built homes with open walls so the wind could pass through, carrying the tone along the whole valley. For 50 years, the hum guarded them, changing with the seasons, teaching them how to live with time instead of beneath it. Then the visitors came. Traders from the inner systems, men with clipped accents and sharper pockets. They saw the sphere not that a miracle, but that a resource. They measured its resonance, charted its effects, and named it the Quiet Core. Within a year, they'd begun constructing refineries to bottle its frequency. They promised the settlers fortune, peace a product, they called it. Or, Go and Near Blind by then stood at the dig site when they lifted the core from the ice. The hum faltered, then fell silent. The storms came back that same night, angrier than ever. The traders fled, the ships torn apart by wind before they reached orbit. Orr was the only one left standing, leaning on his cane, watching the core roll free from the wreckage. It didn't glow anymore. It pulsed faintly, like the last heartbeat of a dream. He knelt beside it, whispering, "You ain't for selling, you're for remembering." Then he buried it again, deep enough that no hand driven by greed could touch it. The storms quieted once more, and when Orr finally passed, the wind hummed low for 3 days, then fell still as if the land itself was bound. Years later, when his story faded into dust, the keepers built a carriage over what had been found. No statues, no carvings, just stacked stones, one atop the other, left to hum in the wind. Travelers still pass by as aware, and they hear a pulse if they wait long enough. A few claim that the hum syncs with their heartbeat, slowing it, steadying it, till all that left is breath and the feel of the earth, quiet patience rising through their bones. And maybe that's how the ledger keeps itself balanced. Not through wealth or record, but through the hands of folks who refuse to rush. Folks who remember that all good things grow, peace, love, prosperity, compound in silence, not in noise. If you will find yourself wandering the Orion storms, you might see the carrot. Don't touch it, don't ask for signs, just sit beside it a while. You'll hear the wind hum its old song, same one Calder heard when he built his dock, same one Tamsin caught on her recorder, same one Leo carried through the stars. The universe ain't forgotten its melody. It's just waiting for someone still enough to listen. In that listening, you'll learn what every soundfarer knew. Patience ain't the act of waiting. It's the art of hearing something before it's born. Generin rolled on like a river through silk, slow and full of memory. The world Orr once guarded became a quiet legend, the kind of story told to children when the storms were too fierce for work and the lamps flickered low. The hum faded from the tongues of the living, but never from the bones of the land. Some nights when the wind was right, folks could still feel the faint vibration underfoot. It pulsed steady to heartbeat, steady as the ticking of eternity. They didn't worship it, didn't study it, didn't claim to own it. They lived by it the way lungs live by breath. But time, bad it always does, that dust around memory, the new generations grew restless. They looked up at the stars and saw wealth unclaimed, systems untapped, frequencies unused. They said the old hum was superstition, use of once sure, but too slow for progress. So they built ships faster than silence itself, driving straight through the calm that had cradled their ancestors. The hum followed them as far as it could before falling behind, leaving them with nothing but the echo of their own haste. Among those restless explorers was a woman named Sarah Vale. She was brilliant and weary in equal measure, a star cartographer who'd mapped more systems than most had dreamed existed. But the longer she traveled, the emptier her discoveries felt. She'd seen the light of newborn suns and the ruins of civilizations long forgotten, but none of it gave her rest. One night, stranded on a derelict outpost near the edge of the dark belt, her ship dead and her transmitter fading, she found a signal barely there, just a hum between channels. The technicians would want the interference, but she, for reasons she couldn't name, recognized it. It was soft, familiar, like the sound her mother made when she used to hum her to sleep back home. She tuned in low, letting it fill the silence of the cabin. It had no rhythm, no melody, just presence. She fell asleep to it that night, and when she woke, the outpost power grid had come online without her touch. The readings made no sense. The hum was acting like fuel, or guidance, or both. For weeks she studied it, recording every frequency shift, but the data told her nothing. The sound didn't change, she did. The longer she listened, the calmer she became. The more she waited, the more the systems repaired themselves dead. Finally, her patience, word spread again, just like it always does. Pilots started tuning their ships to Sura frequency, claiming their engines ran smoother, their navigation steadier. The corporate boards caught wind, and within months they'd built an empire around it, calling it the Calm Drive. Ads filled the channels. Travel faster by moving slower. They never mentioned the hum. They couldn't explain it, so they just trademarked it.
Fema became famous overnight, though she never sought it. They built her a research station orbiting Quiet Moon, paid her in credits she never spent, showered her with honors she didn't want. Every day she'd walk past her assistants, past the machines and wires, hymning with captured silence, and feel a weight in her chest. "We're not listening anymore," she'd whisper. "We're just harvesting patience." One night she shut off every recorder, sealed the lab, and opened the windows to the void. There it was again, the hum, raw and steady, coming from the dark itself. She didn't analyze it that time. She just listened, like Ar had, like Rhea had, like all those before her who'd understood that peace ain't the absence of motion, but the balance of it. The next day she resigned, left the boards, left the research, left the wealth, took a small shuttle and drifted out where the static grew thickest. Months later, a transport crew sped her ship orbiting a dead star. The hull was iced over, power long gone, but the beacon was still transmitting a single tone, low and endless. They recovered her log.
The last entry read, "The universe doesn't speak in equations, it breathes." All we needed was to breathe with it. After her disappearance, people started hearing the hum again. Not through machines, but through moments. A merchant who stopped counting his profits long enough to watch a sunrise. A Mainer who paused mid-swing to feel the earth answer his rhythm. A child who stood in the rain and felt time itself slow down just to match her laughter. They didn't call it magic. They thought it remembering. Whole settlements began rebuilding, their clocks to tick slower, their lights to dim softer. They built quiet fields, places with no comms, no data, no interference, just stillness. They said it helped the crops grow better, helped hearts heal faster. The medical journals couldn't prove it, but they kept reporting lower stress, fewer illnesses, longer lives. The boards tried to monetize it again, but the hum doesn't sell. It only answers those who wait. Years later, a traveler named Noel, no title, no home, found the Kara Ora people had built, half buried under starlit snow. He sat there 3 days, no fire, no talk. On the third night, he swore the stones began to hum again. Pulled a small recorder from his pack and captured it, sent it across the systems, saves a message with no signature, no credits asked, no coordinates given. The message spread faster than news, faster than trade. It reached stations, planets, wanderers everywhere, and though the recording played dazed silence, people who listened felt something shift, like a weight settling instead of pressing. That was the birth of the second pause. It didn't come with banners or leaders, it just happened. Quiet day dawned. Engines slowed, markets eased, voices softened. For the first time in ages, the galaxy moved in rhythm again. The hum, older than wealth, older than time, flowed freely, no longer buried under greed, no longer captured by need. Now, if you stand at the edge of the world which storms once raged and the wind turns to breath, you might still feel it. A pulse, faint but steady, humming deep inside the bones of creation. Maybe at the ledger, maybe at the memory of every soul who learned to wait, or maybe at the sound of the universe remembering itself, one long, patient exhale stretching through eternity. And if you listen close enough, real quiet like, you'll hear what Sarah heard, what Ora felt, what Rhea lived. The hum ain't gone. It just waiting for you to stop.
And amen. Sacrifice that the hum took on its quietest shape yet, not in the sky nor the machines nor the bones of planets, but in the hearts of those who stopped needing to understand it. They worlds had changed. The great towers of commerce that once reached for the stars now sat half empty, their glass faces gathering dust. The rich didn't vanish, they just grew quiet. The poor didn't rise, they just stopped rushing. Civilization didn't collapse, it settled. They say there was a town out on the fringe of what used to be the central roots, a town with no name, just coordinates on old charts, the kind of place pilots only found when they got lost, or maybe when the hum decided they were read to. The air there had a stillness that carried through the skin and into the soul, and the folks who lived there or seemed to share one thing in common, peace that couldn't be shaken, even by misfortune. Their garns grew full, their fires never went out, and their debts somehow never came due. Nobody could explain it. They'd called it the slow miracle.
And amen, that town named Ellis. He'd once been one of the loud ones, a trader, fast-tongued and silver-suited, known across the belt for dealing faster than a conscience could keep up. But when the markets crashed during the Great Quiet, he lost everything he thought made him whole. His ships, his fortune, his reputation. So he walked away, tired of bargaining with ghosts, and followed a whisper he couldn't explain, a faint hum he heard on the wind one night while sleeping under the ruins of a station dome. That whisper led him in. Ellis built himself a shack near the river where the reeds sang at dusk. At first he tried to keep busy fishing, repairing old engines, tinkering with bits of machinery salvaged from forgotten freighters. But the more he worked, the less he felt the need to finish. The hum taught him patience the way the tide teaches the shore slope, persistent, shaping him without demanding. Years passed, and he grew into stillness like a tree finds its roots. And then one day, a traveler came ridden in on a hover cart sputtering smoke, carrying nothing but a busted receiver and a look of defeat. They said you can fix anything, she told Ellis, voice rough from the wind. Even the things that don't want to be fixed. He smiled, that easy kind of smile that takes the weight out of booths. Maybe, he said. But first, we said, let the quiet settle, so they did. For an hour, maybe two, neither spoke, just sat there, listening to the river and the hum hiding underneath it. When he finally picked up the receiver, he didn't touch the circuit. He just turned the dial slow until a faint vibration filled the air. The traveler froze. What is that? She whispered. Ellis grinned. Patience, darling. The kind you forgot you had. She stayed the night. Then another. Then a week. By the end of it, her ship worked fine, though Ellis never laid a hand on the engine. Before she left, she asked, you would think about selling this? Teaching it? He shook his head, selling quiet like selling breath. Ain't mine to own. She left behind her name, Lisa, and stories of him spread. Pilots began coming not to trade, but to listen. His shack turned into a porch, then a gathering place, then a whole settlement built on silence. They didn't have currency there, that time. You needed something. You offered an hour of stillness. You wanted to learn? You listened for a day. You wished to teach? You waited for someone to ask. They said the hum flowed thick through that valley, like gold through a riverbed, but invisible and weightless. Children grew up knowing the sound before they knew their own names. One night, an old trader from the Corps arrived, same kind Ellis once was. His clothes were fine, his eyes restless. You could make a fortune out of this, he said, staring at the people sitting in silence. You could bottle it, sell it across the galaxy. Ellis laughed soft. That's the difference between you and me, friend. You still think wealth's something you can hold. But wealth, what happens when you stop grabbing? The trader sneered. You yelled at one of them monks. Maybe, Ellis said, eyes twinkling, or maybe I just ran out of things worth losing. That night the trader left, muttering curses about wasted genius. But weeks later word reached that his ship had changed course mid-flight. He'd been seen drifting through the void, engines quiet, lights dimmed, following a signal no scanner could trace. Maybe he finally heard the hum, maybe it found him anyway. Ellis never sought proof. He didn't write books or build monuments. He just kept listening, and folks kept coming. When he passed, they didn't bury him in stone. They set his boots by the river so the water could hum through them forever. Some nights, travelers say you can hear footsteps in the shallows soft, even walking nowhere fast. And so the settlement stayed, unmarked on charts, but steady at a heartbeat. It became a place where lost souls found rest, not through revelation, but through rhythm. People came angry, left calm, came empty, left full, came rich, left humble. They didn't take nothing away except the quiet that followed them home. Over time, the galaxy learned to live again in smaller beats, less rush, more reckoning, less wanting, more remembering. The hum was never loud, never showy, never trying to prove itself. It just was.
It's like rain on tin or boots on old wood or the breath of the world exhaling slow. And maybe that Earless was heading from the start not toward gold or glory, but toward stillness, toward the kind of peace that don't need witnesses. Because in the end, every fortune fades, every name forgets itself, every fire burns out. But the hum don't end. It waits, just like the stars, just like patience, just like love. When the years folded in on themselves and memory blurred into folklore, the town that Ellis built was no longer a place. It was a lesson whispered across generations. The coordinates had long vanished from charts, swallowed by dust and drift, but wanderers still found it when they needed to, same way the thirsty man finds a stream he wasn't looking for. Some said it was the hum calling them. Others said it was the weight of their own weariness steering their compass. Either way they arrived, and either way they stayed long enough to remember how to breathe again.
Out in the old trade sectors, those broken bones of industry left to rust in orbit around dead suns. A few remnants of the old market folk kept trying to bring back the glory days. They built faster ships, brighter ads, louder promises. The slogan changed every decade, but the song stayed the same. Buy peace, rent purpose, own your destiny. The strange thing was, nobody was listening anymore. The hum had sunk too deep into the hearts of the common folk. They'd rather fix a broken window than chase a new skyline. They'd rather share a meal than own a fortune. And that, more than any revolution or war, was what finally changed the course of humankind. It wasn't that people stopped dreaming. They just started dreaming different. Success no longer meant reaching farther, but settling deeper. There were still traders, still engineers, still builders, but their craft was quieter, steadier. You could tell a master of their work by how long they were willing to pause between strikes of the hammer. Patience became the new measure of greatness, and though the stars still shone just as fierce, it was the silence between them that mattered most. One such craftsman lived out on the rim of the Vega Fringe, a blacksmith named Halvin Dorr. He wasn't born into the hum, he earned it. His family had been noise merchants, creators of artificial soundscapes for city folk who'd forgotten what stillness was. They made a fortune pumping chaos into homes that couldn't stand quiet. Halvin grew up thinking peace was a product you could design. But one day, while fixing a sound coil that burned out, he heard something strange, sheer faint pulse beneath the static, deep and steady, like a heartbeat in the wires. He followed it to the back of the shop, where the wall had cracked, revealing a sliver of daylight from the alley outside. The sound wasn't coming from the machine, it was coming from the world itself. That night he packed a bag, left his family a note that said only, "Listen close." He walked till the noise faded, till the neon signs dimmed, till his boots met dirt. Out there, far from the hum of men, he found an old forge rusting in the hills. He cleaned it, lit it, and began his second life. But he didn't forge for profit anymore. He forged for rhythm. He'd hammer slow, breathing between strikes, waiting till the it faded for swinging bend. Each blade, each hinge, each horseshoe he made carried the hum inside it, not by spell or science, but by presence. His tools outlasted empires. Word spread of his work, and folks traveled from light years away just to hold one of his creations. They said a door blade never dulled if its wielder moved with patience. They said his hinges never squeaked so long and the door opened for kindness. One old prospector claimed his shovel sang while he dug. How never but credit, ain't me, he'd say, it the pause between the work that does it. He grew old in that forge, beard silver red starlight, hands callous but steady. When apprentices came begging to learn his secrets, he'd set him down by the fire and tell them stories instead of throwing him out a hammer. He'd talk about Orr and Sarah and Ellis and how each of them learned that every gain worth keeping starts with a moment of quiet. Some got frustrated leaving before the first week ended, others stayed listening. Those who stayed long enough learned that the real lesson wasn't in the metal, it was in the space between beats. After Halvin passed, the forge didn't cool. Travelers swear they still see a faint glow in the hills, even though no one tended the fire in generations. Some say it the hum working through the embers, keeping the rhythm alive. Others say it Halvin himself hammering somewhere that out of sight, reminding the stars that even they need time to rest. The funny thing is, no one can agree whether these folks, Orrin, Sarah, Ellis, Halvin, ever truly lived, or if they were just stories told by folks who needed proof that patience still had power. But out there, sitting by a campfire with the rain coming down and the wind moving like an old hymn, truth don't matter much. The hum's still there. Maybe that all the proof anyone then needed, and if you close your eyes long enough, you can almost see it. The old mine burying the core beneath the storm, the wanderer staring into the void, the trader watching the river settle, the smith breathing between strikes, each one listening, each one waiting.
Each one leaving behind something money could never measure, that the kind of wealth the universe was built to hold, the kind you can't spend, can't lose, can't rake, the kind that sings when you stop long enough to hear it, the kind that turns silence into gold. So if you find yourself wandering through the noise, friend, remember this: don't rush the river, don't force the forge, don't chase the hum, just sit still and let it find you. The rest, the fortune, the peace, the reckoning, it'll all come when you're ready. Always does. They say that after Halvin Forge dimmed for the last time, the hum grew quieter still. Not gone, mind you, just softer, like a teacher stepping back once the lesson been learned. But even in its hush, it found new ways to reach those who were listening. It showed up in the flicker of lanterns, in the way rain struck tin, in the still breath between thunder and answer. It became part of the rhythm of living itself, too natural to name and too precious to measure. Years passed and the galaxy kept changing.
New colonies bloomed on worlds where soil had forgotten the touch of seed. And in those new places, the hum waited patiently, humming beneath the wind turbines in glass domes, hiding behind the hum of progress. Most didn't notice it anymore. They were too busy chasing the next star, the next prophet, the next miracle. But Tud did, those who'd inherited the quiet hearts of the old world. They didn't talk about the hum, they lived by it. One such soul was a woman named Juna Kor. She wasn't a prophet or a wanderer or any kind of legend, just a farmer on a dry moon where the air shimmered with heat, and hope was a thing you watered at crop slow, stubborn, and often thankless. Her land was a scar of red dust and cracked stone, good for nothing but teaching humility. But she worked it anyway, day after day, breath after breath, till her skin looked carved from the same earth she tilled. Folks thought she was a fool for staying. The big agri-corps had long abandoned that moon, leaving behind rusted machines in ghost towns swallowed by sand. But Juna had seen something in that silence.
And sun dropped and the heat gave way to stillness. She swore the ground itself hummed, not loud, just enough to feel in her bones, like a lullaby for the weary. It wasn't wealth she was after, it was harmony. She started planting seeds she'd saved from the old world grains that didn't grow easy, roots that needed patience. The first harvest failed, so did the second. By the third, even the wind seemed to pity her. But Juna didn't quit. Each time she planted, she sang low, wordlet tones that matched the hum in the dirt. She said the ground needed to remember what trust sounded like. Then one night, the rain came. Not a storm, just a soft, steady drizzle that smelled like new beginnings. When dawn broke, green shoots had clawed through the red dust like stubborn hope. Within weeks, the whole valley shimmered with life. Travelers who passed through swore the fields made no sound at, yet the silence itself felt alive. They called it the quiet harvest. Soon others came, not to buy, not to trade, but to learn. Juna never turned anyone away.
She'd sit on her porch with her boots in the mud and talk slow. If words were seeds too, needing time to root. You can't force a thing to grow, she'd say. You give it what it needs and wait for it to remember. She taught him how to listen to the wind before plowing, how to watch the stars before watering. And somehow, the more they followed her ways, the richer their land became, not yet in crops, but in peace. The hum had found a new home, humming through the roots and rivers of a world that had nearly forgotten how to be still. Years later, when Juna grew too old to walk the fields, she'd sit on that same porch and hum to the horizon, her eyes half closed, her heart half in another world. One evening, a young boy asked her if the hum was real or just a story old folks told. She smiled, that soft, weather-eater smile of someone who's seen both sides of truth. Don't matter none. She said, you can feel it real enough. When she passed, the valley stayed green. Her house fell to ruin, but her fields never withered. They say when the wind sweeps across them now, it sounds like her voice steady, low, unbroken. The quiet harvest became legend, carried across systems by wanderers who'd seen enough chaos to know peace when they found it. People started building their own fields of stillness, not for food, but for thought. They'd sit there for hours listening to nothing and come back wiser than they went. And so the hum changed again, let a sound, more away, a rhythm you could carry without making noise. The rich started coming too, tired of their glittering cages. They'd pay fortunes just to sit barefoot in the dust and forget the world. But the dust didn't care for their money. It only hummed for those who waited long enough to hear. The scholars tried to write about it, build machines to measure it, turn it into equations. They found frequencies, sure, but never meaning. They could record the sound, but not the stillness behind it. One young scientist, after years of chasing data, left her post and vanished into the valley. Decades later, her notebook was found in the roots of a tree.
The last line read, "All truths hum, but only patience makes them sing."
Now, in the far corners of the galaxy, where lay travels slow and time even slower, folks still tell Jenna's story. They don't tell it loud. They whisper it in the pauses between talk, the quiet between thunderclaps, the hush after the rain. Because the hum ain't gone, it's a learn to live inside the pauses of things. And maybe that what or those stories were leading to the miner, the wanderer, the trader, the smith, the farmer. Each one found the same wealth in a different tongue. The kind of wealth that don't glitter, don't shout, don't demand. The kind that waits, the kind that hums. Some say the hum ended with Juna, that once her valley went quiet, the world had finally earned its rest. But those who still wander under open skies know better. The hum never ends. It travels, changing its voice for those who need it most. After the quiet harvest, centuries passed in a gentle rhythm. Trade still happened, progress still rolled on, but it did so with a kind of grace the universe hadn't known in ages. And they called it the slow Renaissance, a time when people built not to conquer but to remember. Cities grew at, but this time they breathed. Towers were built to sway with the wind instead of fighting it. Lights dimmed with the moon to save the stars, and in the center of every settlement, no matter how big or small, stood a haven of stillness, a place where no machines hummed, no messages flashed, and no sound dared disturb the peace. Those who entered weren't looking for answers, they were listening for them. The hum was always there, faint to breath, deep be time. In one such haven, high in the mountains of Aris Prime, lived a keeper named Eno Var. He'd been born during the tail end of the Great Expansion, a child of data and light. His parents were surveyors for the interstellar cartels, their lives spent charting new worlds that could be sold to the highest bidder. But Eno was different. Even as a boy, he'd stop mid-task, eyes closed, if hearing something that no one else could. His teachers called it daydreaming. His parents called it failure, but Eno called it listening.
Tonight.
Heather, left home at 16 and drifted for years, working whatever jobs the winds of fortune threw his way. Ship mechanic, miner cook, none of it stuck. He wasn't running from the world, just waiting till it got quiet enough to make sense. Then one night, after a bad storm on a barren moon, he found refuge in an old temple built by forgotten hands. The walls were cracked, the roof half collapsed, but in the center stood a pool of still water so clear it reflected stars that weren't even in the sky anymore. When he knelt beside it, he heard it, that same hum, faint but certain, rising through the stone. He stayed there 3 days, drinking from the pool, sleeping by its edge, listening till he understood without understanding. When he left, he carried nothing but the echo of that sound and a new kind of calm. He began building havoc across the worlds he wandered, small spaces carved from chaos, open to all, bound by one rule. No noise, no hurry, no price. He didn't ask for donations, didn't seek credit. He just built, waited, and moved on.
By the time he reached Aris Prime, there were dozens of Havos spread across the stars, each one humming softly with the same quiet rhythm.
Last Haven was his masterpiece. Built into the face of a mountain that touched the clouds, it looked like nothing, just stone, water, and silence. But inside, it was alive. Every wall, every pillar, every surface resonated with the hum, tuned so finely that even the breath of a visitor became part of the song. People came from all over, leaving their noise outside the coats at the door. Some stayed for hours, some for weeks. None left unchanged. There was no religion there, no creed, no leader, just listening. And somehow, that was enough. One winter, a young philosopher came to the haven. Curious but skeptical, he told Eno that silence was just emptiness, that the hum was nothing but a trick of the mind. Eno nodded, as if agreeing, and led him to the center pool. "You're right," he said. "It all nothing, but if you sit long enough with nothing, you'll find it everything." The philosopher stayed through the night. When dawn came, he wept, not from sorrow, but from peace too big to fit inside words. Years later, he'd write books that reshaped the way the galaxy thought about time and being.
But in out his pages, he never once meant Eno or the hum. He said it didn't belong to him to explain. It belonged to the silence between thoughts. Eno grew old in that mountain. When he died, no one buried him. They left him sitting by the pool, eyes half open, they if still listening. For a long time, no one dared enter the chamber. Then one spring morning, a group of travelers came by and found the pool still humming, clearer than then. Eno's reflection was gone, but the water rippled slow and steady, breathing like it had learned the rhythm of his heart. From that day forward, people started calling him the last listener. Not because the hum ended with him, but because he was the last to remind the world that listening itself was wealth. Empires could rise and fall, currencies could come and go, stars could flare and fade, but a longing one soul remembered how to be still. The universe would never go broke. Generations later, when the story of Eno reached the new worlds at the edge of known space, it didn't come in a legend, it came in a memory. Folks would swear they'd heard his hum in their sleep or in the creak of their ships they drifted through the void. Some said they'd wake with tears on their cheeks, feeling that they'd just been reminded of something they'd known all along. The hum had come full circle, once born from the heart of the earth, carried through the stars, passed from hand to hand, breath to breath, till it found its true home not in the ground, not in the sky, but in the quiet between. It was no longer a sound to be heard, it was a presence to be lived. And if you close your eyes right now, real slow, and let the rain on the roof talk its low rhythm, you might just hear it again. The deep, patient note of the universe reminding you that everything worth keeping moves slow, grows quiet, and hums forever. Time went on, and it always does, quiet, circular, patient. The havoc Eno built began to fade into the folds of history, swallowed up by moss and mountain, by wind and dust. But the hum, well, that thing don't vanish. It simply changes its address.
Left the walls, the water, the stones, and found its way into smaller places. Hands, hearts, glances shared 'tween folk who understood more than they spoke. The hum became the language of the unhurried, a way of knowing each other without all the noise. By then, the stars had started cooling, not fast enough for panic, but slow enough for poets to notice. The galaxies were stretching themselves thin, and even light seemed to sigh before traveling. The people of that age, what few were left, had everything and nothing. They'd conquered hunger, cured disease, mastered travel between suns, yet they'd come full circle to find that peace still came from the same old place. Silence, breath, and the hum waiting inside both. It was wound that twilight age that a drifter named Callan Tove began his wandering. Some called him a collector, others a fool. He traveled the dead systems, the broken colonies, gathering relics nobody wanted anymore, bits of old machines, cracked ledgers, scraps of carved stone with words half erased by time. He wasn't looking for riches, he was listening for echoes. He said he was trying to rebuild a song the universe forgot how to sing.
One night, camped in the ruins of a fallen satellite city, he found an old transmitter buried in the sand. Its circuits were rusted, its antenna bent, but when he powered it up, it made a sound low, steady, ancient, not mechanical, not static. The hum, that same hum Orr once felt in the earth, the same one Sarah heard in the void, the same that sang through Ellis River, Halvin Forge, and Junna Fields. Callan froze, every hair on his arm standing up at a prayer. "You're still here," he whispered, while greeting an old friend. He carried that transmitter with him for years, fixing it when it failed, talking to it when the loneliness got heavy. He tuned it every night before sleep, and sometimes it would answer, not with words, but with rhythm. When his heartbeat matched its pulse, he'd dream of places he'd never been, faces he'd never met. He'd see Orr digging by lantern light, Sarah staring into the void, Ellis laughing by the river, Halvin hammering in the glow of his forge, Junna humming to her crops, Eno breathing by the mountain pool. He'd wake with tears on his cheeks and a calm he couldn't explain. Over time, folks started hearing about the man with the hum. They'd find him in some forgotten corner of the galaxy, sitting cross-legged beside his transmitter, eyes closed, listening. When asked what he was doing, he'd say, "I'm reminding the stars what patience sounds like." And sure enough, the hum always found its way into their hearts. Ships ran smoother after meeting him. Crops grew better. Lovers quarreled less. Nobody could prove it, but everybody felt it. He became known as the Keeper of the Last Note. Not a title he gave himself, but one that settled on him at dusk. Quiet, natural, inevitable. He never claimed to own the hum, never tried to teach it. He just carried it like a lantern in the dark, passing it from presence to presence without saying a word. Toward the end of his life, when his bones ached and his hands trembled from the long walk of years, Callan reached the edge of the known map, a place where no comms reached, no stars shone clear. It was said the galaxy ended there, spilling into the dark ocean of the unmade. But Callan didn't see an end. He saw a horizon humming. Built one final fire, set the transmitter beside it, turned the dial till the hum came through. soft a heartbeat under snow. And for the first time, he sang with it. Not words, just tone. Just patience turned to sound. The night wind carried it out across the void, and thus swear it never stopped traveling. In the centuries that followed, explorers at the rim began picking up a strange signal. A frequency too, even to be random, too gentle to be made. They couldn't locate its source. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. They tied it the Tove line. It became a beacon for wanderers, a guide for ships drifting blind. When your instruments failed, when the darkness closed in, you could tune to the Tove line and find peace in its steady hum. And maybe that's how it was meant to end. Not with silence, but with stillness carried on. Callan never saw the worlds that followed, the generations that found comfort in his note. But maybe he didn't need to. Maybe he knew the hum had outlived him again, same mate it always did.
They're saying now among the spacers and the drifters, when you can't find your way, stop moving. The hum will catch up, and it always does. Maybe not in a sound you can hear, but in a feeling, the soft churn of breath, the weight of peace settling like dust on a forgotten floor. And so the circle closes once more, the hum remains. It ain't a sound anymore, it a promise, a whisper from the old world, that even in the cold, even in the void, there a rhythm waiting for you. You just gotta listen slow enough to join it. So if someday you find yourself sitting under the stars with rain tapping the tin and your thoughts running too far for their own good, try what Callan did. Turn down the world, let the fire crackle, let the night breathe. Somewhere in that quiet, the universe will hum again, steady, eternal, patient. And when it does, you'll know you found what all those souls were searching for. The wealth that don't rust, the gold that don't glimmer, the song that never ends.
They say that long after Callan hum drifted into the dark, there came an age when sound itself began to fade. The universe was stretching thinner than old leather, its stars too far apart to hear one another anymore. The people of that ed, if you could still call them people, were quieter too, not out of reverence but necessity. Words didn't travel the way they used to. Even the strongest radios sent out signals that vanished before reaching another soul. So they learned to live by gestures, by patience, by small kindnesses that didn't need transmitting. They made themselves echo keepers, not because they made noise, but because they remembered it. One of them was a boy named Laren. He lived on a drifting colony that circled what remained of a star too faint to cast a shadow. His elders told him stories about the old hum, how it was once strong enough to shake mountains, how it sang through the bones of the earth, how it led wanderers home through storms and silence alike. But Laren had never heard a hum. All he knew was the static hiss of a dying transmitter and the soft rhythm of his own breath inside a cracked helmet. Still he believed. He didn't know why, but he did. Every night, after the chores were done and the generators cooled, he'd sit by the viewport and watch the dead star burn its last embers. He'd close his eyes and try to hear something in the static. Not hope, hope was too loud for a world like his, but memory. A whisper of what once was. Sometimes he thought he felt it, faint and far, like a drum beat 100 lifetimes away. Then it'd fade, leaving him with only breath and stillness. One cycle, while scavenging through the lower decks for spare wires, Laren stumbled on a locked crate rocked with symbols older than language. Inside was a small device, a cube of worn metal and glass, humming softly even after out the years. He didn't recognize it, but the sound it made stopped his heart. It wasn't loud, not even clear, but it was alive. The hum, the same note his ancestors had spoken of. It pulsed faintly, slow as sleep. All he knew was the static hiss of a dying transmitter and the soft rhythm of his own breath inside a cracked helmet. Still, he believed he didn't know why, but he did. Every night, after the chores were done and the generators cooled, he'd sit by the viewport and watch the dead star burn its last embers. He'd close his eyes and try to hear something in the static. Not hope, hope was too loud for a world like his, but memory, a whisper of what once was. Sometimes he thought he felt it, faint and far, like a drumbeat 100 lifetimes away. Then it'd fade, leaving him with only breath and stillness. One cycle, while scavenging through the lower decks for spare wires, Laren stumbled on a lock crate rocked with symbols older than language. Inside was a small device, a cube of worn metal and glass, humming softly even after out the years. He didn't recognize it, but the sound it made stopped his heart. It wasn't loud, not even clear, but it was alive. The hum, the same note his ancestors had spoken of. It pulsed faintly, slow as sleep. Ran to his elders, but they didn't believe him. Relic someone said, so do engines. Don't chase ghosts, boy. But Laren couldn't let it go. He spent nights studying the cube, not trying to fix or decode it, just listening. The more he did, the more he felt something awaken, not in the cube, but in himself. He started sleeping easier, breathing slower, speaking gently. The hum didn't make him stronger, it made him still. Then one night, while the colony power grid sputtered out during a solar flare, the cube brightened. The hum deepened, and for the first time Laren understood it wasn't a sound, it was connection. He felt it vibrate through the metal floor, through the walls, through the bones of the station itself. And when he looked out, he swore the dead star flickered back to life, yet for a breath, like it was hum along with him. When the power returned, the elders found Laren sitting cross-legged beside the cube, eyes closed, smile soft at dawn. He told them he'd heard every voice that lived, not with his ears, but with his soul. The miner, the wanderer, the trader, the smith, the farmer, the listener, the keeper, they were all there, humming, tethered. They never left, he said. They'd been waiting for someone to listen again. Word spread through the colony, and before long, people started gathering by the cube. They didn't worship it, they just sat near it, quiet and easy. Old disputes cooled, broken machines started working smoother, and even the crops grew greener in the hydro fields. When asked how, Laren would shrug and say, "Things grow better when you stop shouting it in." He grew older, his hair silver like starlight, his voice barely above a whisper. Before he passed, he recorded a single message into the cube. "If you find this," he said, "don't analyze it, don't sell it, just listen. The hum don't need believers, it just needs breath." After his death, the cube went dark, but only for a while. 1,000 years later, explorers found it floating in the void, still humming. They couldn't trace its origin, couldn't replicate its frequency. They called it the last song of Laren, and it became the new cosmic constant, the frequency at which peace itself seemed to vibrate. Every ship built after that was tuned to it, every station aligned to it. It was said that long as the hum persisted, humanity still had something worth remembering, and so it went. The hum outlived the colonies, the ships, the stars. Even when there were no voices left to tell the stories, the universe itself carried the rhythm through magnetism, through light, through silence, a song too patient to die. Maybe in the end, that what the hum always was, not sound, not science, not myth, just the quiet truth that no matter how far we drift, how many riches we pile or empires we burn, there's something eternal at the bottom of it. It's steady, humble, waiting for us to fall, still enough to feel it. And if ever there comes a night when every sun goes out and every name fades into dust, the hum will still be there, riding the last breeze across a cold and empty sky. Not mourning, not lingering, just existing, same as always. The sound of patience itself, the wealth that never needed owning. So hew to Laren and to all who came before him, to Orr, Sarah, Ellis, Halvin, Juna, Eno, Callan, each one a verse in the same endless song, each one teaching the same truth in a different key. You don't have to chase what already waits for you. You don't have to build what never breaks. You don't have to speak what already hums. Just stop. Listen. The rest will take care of itself and out beyond the edge of everything. May the stars once burned and time forgot its own name. That hum still rolls low and eternal like a campfire breathing in the rain. The universe ain't empty. It's just pulsing, waiting humming. Maybe that's how it truly ends, or maybe it never does. The hum has no need for conclusions. It's the breath between them. The pause wade stories rest their bones. Ages rolled by, the pot so long that stars burned out and were born in before a single word was spoken. Civilizations rose, quiet ones this time, built not from conquest but from memory. The people of that far age no longer remembered names or Aura or Junna or Eno, and their teachings were carved into the way they lived. They didn't call it the hum anymore. They played it the underflow, the steady rhythm of existence that ran beneath all things. They didn't use engines that screamed or cities that howled. Their machines pulsed in harmony with the underflow, each tuned to the same patient cadence that Laren once carried in his chest. Ships no longer raced across space. They drifted, guided by resonance instead of calculation. They said that when two ships matched frequencies, they could sense each other long before the light arrived. It was navigation by trust, by stillness. There was a say among them. To move fast is to forget the song, and so they didn't. They lived slow, and they lived long. Not immortal, just unhurried. They learned to age like rivers, change in shape without losing men, and in their slowness they found beauty sharper than any jewel, wealth deeper than any vault. It wasn't a world of miracles or machines anymore.
It was a world of meaning. One of these new souls was a woman named Tall. She was a scholar of resonance, though not the kind that studied it with instruments.
Her work was to travel from world to world, listening to what each one remembered. Every planet hummed in its own way, and she'd sit for months, sometimes years, till she could write down what it was trying to say. Her journals were filled with notes of wind and water, of stone and pulse, of silence so deep it carried the memory of stars. On one distant moon, she found something strange, an old ruin, older than recorded time, buried beneath dunes of silver sand. In its heart was a sphere of metal no wider than her hand, still humming faintly after who knows how many millennia. She recognized it instantly. The Tovline, the keeper hum. She didn't need to power it or repair it. It sang yet fine on its own, the same low note that had carried through every age. Tao wept when she hated. She said later that it wasn't sadness or joy she felt. It was recognition, like tapping home to a place you'd forgotten existed. She took the sphere with her, not to keep but to share. Everywhere you went, she played it. The hum never changed, but the people who heard it did. They said it slowed their blood, softened their grief, made them remember the things they'd let rush pause. Tall became known in the keeper voice, though she claimed the title was wrong. I'm not keeping it, she'd say, it's keeping me. When her time came, she didn't pass her body to the soil or the stars. She left it to the hum. Her people placed the sphere on her chest, and as her breath faded, the resonance deepened, spreading through the chamber, through the ground, through the whole moon itself. From that day forward, the moon glowed faintly at night, not from light, but from vibration. The hum had fused with it, turning the whole world into a single slow note. Centuries later, when travelers from distant systems passed through that region, they'd feel a calm settle over their ships the moment they neared the moon. Instruments would glitch, but hearts would steady. Some would linger, just floating there for days, listening without knowing why. The underflow had claimed another voice. Tall hum joined the old ones, carrying the same story forward, different name, same truth. And so the pattern continued. Each age forgot and rediscovered, forgot and remembered. Every few thousand years, someone somewhere would stop long enough to feel the pulse beneath the noise. They'd give it a new name, underflow, murmur, still current, God song, but the melody never changed. It didn't belong to time. It belonged to existence itself. Now, maybe they're a place far beyond what any chart could map, where all those hums gather. Not a heaven, not a vault, just a horizon humming with every patience they ever learned. You could stand then for 1,000 lifetimes and never hear the same tone twice, yet somehow they belong together. Or hum rough for stone, Sarah sharp than starlight, Ellis warm why river water, Halvin steady as steel, Juna gentle as rain, Eno deep he breath, Callan endless as dark, Laren bright to dawn, Tall soft the memory, a choir of stillness singing without voice. Maybe that dead the hum always wanted to go, not to save us, not to teach us, but to wait with us. Maybe it knew that wealth, real wealth, wasn't in gathering or owning, but in remembering, in holding still long enough to let the world hum through you. And maybe when the very last light fades and the last breath leaves the last world, the hum will still roll on, slow and patient of the first heartbeat unheard. Not that ending, not a beginning, just the forever in between. As you're listening to this now, under the rain by the fire, with the weight of a long road behind you, take this truth with you. The hum ain't gone. It never was. It in you, same as it was in them. Don't rush it. Don't question it. Just let it hum. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of stars, the universe will hum back. They say that after the age of Tall, the hum grew so subtle that even silence bowed to it. There wasn't a sound anymore, not even a vibration. It was the rhythm behind being itself. The underflow had woven its way through gravity, through the pulse of atoms, through the faint shimmer between moments. It had become the heartbeat of reality, the metronome of the cosmos. Life that arose after that age didn't so much hear it to live in tune with. It, the way a tree bends towards sunlight, without a thickened wire. Among those who came next were the quiet-born folk who never learned to speak because they didn't need to. They communicated through resonance, through small harmonics that carried feeling rather than word. To them, sound was sacred, and silence was its temple.
They believed that every action, walking, breath, and building mending left ant in the underflow, and so they lived carefully, treading soft through the world like guests in a vast ancient home. One of these folk, a wanderer named Revan, had a habit no one quite understood. Every dawn he'd walk out to the edge of the cliff where his village met the sea and hum. Not loud, not long, just one steady note. The wind would catch it, carry it out across the water, where it'd blend with the crash of waves and the call of unseen birds. Some said he was speaking to the sea. Others said he was listening to it speak back. Either way, the tide seemed to water his rhythm. Now, Revan wasn't no prophet, and he sure wasn't trying to be one. He was a maker of tools, a repairer of what the world wore down. But he had a sense about him, the kind that don't come from stud, but from listening longer than most are willing to. He said every broken thing still had its hum, just quieter. His job, he claimed, wasn't to fix, but to remind. Metal forgets what it was, he once said, tapping a rusted hinge till it sang again, my work to help it remember. Folks came from far and wide, bringing him things long dead, machines from the sky age, instruments from the water years, relics of civilizations that spoke in numbers instead of notes. He'd take them apart slow, humming he worked, till the old rhythm crept back into M. More often than not, they'd work again, not like before, not perfect, but alive. Some whispered that Raven didn't repair machines at it, that he repaired the world memory instead. One evening, at dusk bled red over the cliffs, a young quiet-born approached him with something wrapped in cloth. When she unfolded it, there lay a small sphere of dull metal, scuffed, cracked, and still humming. The keeper hummed, the same that had drifted from Eno Mountain Pool, from Callan Transmitter, from Laren Cube, from Tal Moon. Its note was weaker now, faint taint of ghost breath, but unmistakable. Raven bowed his head the moment he heard it. He didn't try to fix it, didn't dare. He just listened. Hours passed, then days. The village stopped their work to join him, sitting by the fire, eyes closed, breath in rhythm. The hum deepened. Gutkit knew it was being remembered again. Some nights, when the wind was right, the cliffs themselves seemed to vibrate along, turning the whole coast into a single low chord. Then came the great silence. A storm unlike any before rolled from the horizon, black and endless. The sea roared, the cliffs split, the sky tore open with light that didn't burn but erased. When it passed, the village was gone. All that remained was Ravan, sitting cross-legged by the broken edge, the hum still cradled in his hands. His eyes were closed, and though the air was still, his lips were moving, a soft tune no wind could scatter. The generations after would woe that place the quiet shore. Travelers who found it said you could still hear a faint vibration under the sand if you pressed your ear to the ground, a hum so deep it felt like the planet itself was remembering a song. And if you stayed there long enough, you'd start humming too, without even noticing. The world had absorbed Revan's patience, his faith, his unshaken stillness. The hum had gone underground, but it hadn't died. It was resting. Time wore on. The quiet born faded into legend, the underflow into myth. New kinds of life rose and fell, creature of light, of crystal, of thought itself. But even they, in their strange silent way, seemed to move to the same rhythm. Every age thought itself the first to discover peace, not realizing they were remembering what had always been. Maybe that's what the hum wanted from the start, to pass beyond words, beyond species, beyond the noise of creation itself, to become the pulse of all that is. And when even the stars forget to shine, it'll still be there, deep beneath the dust and dark, whispering one truth to whatever might come next. Patience ain't stillness. Stillness is life. Wealth ain't measured in gold. It measured in calm, and every ending hums the same note at every beginning. So if distant traveler, eon from now, stumbles across that quiet shore, maybe they'll find Revan hum still floating through the air. Maybe they'll sit a while, close their eyes, and feel it travel through them, the old, patient rhythm they've been singing since the first breath. They'll hum back, not knowing why, and in that moment, the circle closes again. The universe don't need a witness, it needs a listener, and maybe that all any of us is worth. Long after Revan's shore was swallowed by the tides of time, there came an era with no names and no need for M. The stars themselves had changed, grown colder, older, their fire reduced to a whisper. Whole galaxies drifted apart so far that even light took lifetimes to cross the dark between them. Yet somewhere in that endless quiet, the hum persisted. Not loud, not even noticeable, just a faint vibration carried through the skeleton of existence. The bones of what once was still remembered the song. It was said that in that dim age, the universe was populated not by flesh and blood, but by beings of dust and will. They didn't build with hands or thin with minds, but they felt. They existed as ripples in the hum itself, yet chords in an infinite melody. They were called resonance. Each one was a living tone, a color of patience, a fragment of memory from the ages before, where one ended and another began. No one could say. They blended like the echoes of an endless canyon. Among these resonants, one stood out, not by strength or brightness, but by curiosity. It drifted through the dark, humming a slightly different tune, slower, deeper, asking questions instead of singing answers. The others felt its rhythm and taught it the wandering note. Wherever it passed, the hum around it tamed, faintly but surely, like the ripple of a pebble in still water. It was not rebellion, it was wonder. It wanted to remember. One day, or what passed for a day, those silent expanses, the wandering note felt a strange pull, like something old was calling from beneath the folds of time. It followed that call across the void until it reached a remnant, a single fragment of world, floating alone, wrapped in mist and gravity last breath. There, buried deep under layers of forgotten matter, it found a glow. Not bright, not proud, just a steady shimmer, like a lantern under ash. It was the hum. The same tone that Aura once whispered to stone, that Tau once carried across moons, that Riven once hummed into the wind. The wandering note recognized it, not with memory, but with instinct. It bent close and resonated along with it, their frequencies slowly aligning until they were one. And in that instant, every story that there was came flooding through: the miner gold, the listener silence, the smith fire, the trader mercy, the farmer patience, the scholar et, the wanderer peace. Not of tales, but of feelings, steady, humble, eternal. The wanderer note began to tremble, not from fear, but realization. It understood now the hum wasn't just a song carried through time. It was time. Every beat, every rise and fall of the universe was part of the same endless melody. And it wasn't looking for a ending, it was looking for harmony. So the wandering note did what no resonant had done before. It quieted itself. Slowly, deliberately, it let go of its tone, allowing the hum to absorb it completely. The moment it did, the entire void changed. Every resonant across the endless dark paused, their frequencies shifting to match the new harmony. For the first time in eternity, they weren't separate tones. They were a chord. The universe, once scattered and silent, began to vibrate phase one. That vibration wasn't loud. It didn't shake stars or birth late. It was softer than breath, but it reached everywhere, even into the empty spaces between atoms. And in that vibration, reality itself seemed to sigh, not in exhaustion, in peace. The hum had finally become whole again. A new balance was born. Not a world, not a species, but a state of being. Energy slowed, light dimmed, motion eased, until everything moved to the same rhythm. The resonance didn't vanish. They merged, each one a sync thread in the grand weave. The hum became their body, their thought, their veil. It was the purest form of existence, no want, no fear, no haste, just harmony. And then, from deep within that harmony, a pulse began, slow, faint, deliberate, like the first heartbeat of creation, echoing again after eon of sleep. The hum wasn't ending, it was breathing. The universe had exhaled, and now it was drawing in once more. The pulse grew stronger, gathering warmth and light, pulling stray atoms together. New stars sparked, slow and small, spreading across the darkness, like embers relighting a campfire, long thought cold. In those newborn stars, worlds formed, tiny fragile things, cradled in the hum-patient hands. And on one of them, somewhere, a sound stirred, not mechanical, not celestial, just the soft exhale of a creature wakened for the first time. Its heart beat once, twice, and the air around it quivered. It didn't know who it was or why it lived. It only knew it was warm, alive, and before it even opened its eyes, it hummed. That hum traveled through air and water and stone, down into the bones of the new world, where it mingled with the deep vibration that had been waiting there all along. The two notes joined, then multiplied, then spread, until the whole planet was singing softly to itself. Life had returned, but this time it started in harmony, not chaos. They remembered before it even began. And so the cycle rolled on. The hum was never lost, never broken, just reborn. Each time a little softer, a little wiser. It didn't need to be heard by ears or felt by hands. It just needed to be lived. And somewhere in the dark, under the quiet of a new dawn, you can still hear it if you listen right. The sound ain't coming from out there, it's coming from in here. Maybe that the whole secret, the one the miners and scholars and wanderers all spent lifetimes chasing the universe don't end. It breathes and don't forget, it rests. And every one of us in our short flicker of light gets to hum our verse in the song that never stops. And when that verse is done, the hum carries it forward, folding it into the great patient rhythm that been singing since the first silence broke. That all wealth there was, and peace there will be, the chance to add your hum to the forever. And so the hum lingered on long after time itself forgot to count. The newborn world spun slow and steady, orbiting not around the sun but around rhythm. On one of those worlds where air shimmered golden and nights hummed blue, there lived a people who called themselves the Keepers of Breath. If they weren't human, not quite more, or what a human might dream of being called patient, their eyes reflecting the horizon instead of light. They didn't speak much, for every word they said was a promise, and every promise had weight. But when they did speak, the world leaned in to listen. They believed that the hum was not a god, nor a law, but a conversation. It ain't telling you what to do, they'd say it, asking you if you listened. That belief shaped their world. Their cities didn't rise, they grew. Their homes weren't built, they breathed. Whole forests tuned themselves to their heartbeats, rivers curved to the flow of their songs, and the air shimmered when they worked together, their harmonies bending gravity itself. You could walk a mile in silence and still feel their melody vibrating through the soles of your feet. Among them was an elder named Corvin, a quiet soul, born with a hum that didn't fit the others. His tone was rough, uneven, almost cracked. When he sang, the world didn't bend. It stuttered. Most keepers saw him in a curiosity. They even hit a flaw, but Corvin didn't mind.
Spent his life walking the long plains, him and Lowell, feeling the world answer in strange, crooked harmonies. He believed that imperfection was part of the hum nature, that a melody too smooth couldn't grow, couldn't learn. One day, while walking through the shadow of the great range, Cor stumbled upon a chasm so deep it seemed bottom lead. The wind rushing out of it wasn't cold nor warm. It was empty, like it carried the memory of things that had never existed. When he hummed toward it, the echo came back broken, not inverted, not opposite, just lost, as if the sound had gone wandering somewhere and forgot how to return. That silence troubled him. For the first time in all his long years, the hum didn't hum back, so Cor stayed. He built himself a small shelter beside that chasm, and for seasons without number, he hummed into it. Morning, night, and at hours between, he wasn't trying to fix it, he was trying to remember it, and slowly, after countless cycles, something began to shift. The wind started changing key, bending to match his cracked tone. Then one day, it answered, not with sound, but with vibration. Lee expands not only will were menable you and help down walking through the shadow of the great range. Cor stumbled upon a chasm so deep it seemed bottom lead. The wind rushing out of it wasn't cold nor warm. It was empty, like it carried the memory of things that had never existed. When he hummed toward it, the echo came back broken, not inverted, not opposite, just lost, as if the sound had gone wandering somewhere and forgot how to return. That silence troubled him. For the first time in all his long years, the hum didn't hum back, so Cor stayed. He built himself a small shelter beside that chasm, and for seasons without number, he hummed into it. Morning, night, and at hours between. He wasn't trying to fix it, he was trying to remember it, and slowly, after countless cycles, something began to shift. The wind started changing key, bending to match his cracked tone. Then one day it answered, not with sound, but with vibration.
Making it, well, the ground trembled, and the mountains echoed with a note no ear could place. It wasn't beautiful, it was true. Word of Corvin's discovery spread. The keepers came from far and wide, standing at the edge of the chasm, feeling the hum that had once gone missing. Some wept, others fell to their knees. They realized that the hum hadn't left. It had been waiting for someone broken enough to find it. From then on, they stopped teaching perfect harmony to their young. Instead, they taught M to crack gracefully, to leave space in their songs for the world to breathe through. Cor spent the rest of his days there, sitting by the chasm edge, humming with the wind. When he passed, they said the mountains bowed, not with sound, but with stillness. His breath drifted into the void, and the hum deepened once more. The people named that place the Hollow Note, and it became their holiest ground. They'd travel there in silence, sit for hours, days, or even lifetimes, humming softly until they found the note that matched their heart. Once they did, they'd leave, lighter, slower, truer. Generation passed, and the keepers changed. They built instruments from the bones of stars, crafted temples that resonated with planetary tones, and learned to shape weather with choirs instead of tools. But through it, they never forgot Corbin's lesson that brokenness ain't the opposite of beauty, it's the earth that gives it depth. So when storms came, they didn't hide. They hummed along with the thunder, letting their fear blend with the chaos until it turned into music. And when drought struck, they didn't beg for rain. They sang to the dust, reminding it that even stillness is part of the song. And so the hum lived on, not in monuments or records, but in the small, imperfect breaths of a people who refused to let silence mean nothing. Every death became a verse, every birth a refrain, and life itself a long, slow melody that never hurried toward its ending. The universe grew quieter around them, but their harmony never wavered. It just sank deeper, further inward, till the very code of their world pulsed like a heart. Maybe that's what the hum had been searching for all along. Not perfection, not stillness, but a place where every flaw could find its pitch. A song that included the cracks, a rhythm that accepted the pauses, and maybe that made the hum smile through the wind when it realized it had finally found that. If you'll find yourself listening to the rain long enough or watching embers dim to ash without saying a word, you might feel it too, that faint vibration, low and steady, rising through your chest like a memory you never lived, that corvid chasm singing, the hollow note. The place where broken hearts keep time for the stars. If you hum back softly, patiently, you might just hear the universe pause for a heartbeat to listen. As the ages rolled on, the keepers' songs spread far beyond their valleys. The hum carried on solar winds, drifted through dust rings and nebulae, slipping between cracks in space-time like water through old wood. Old planets began to echo with tones they didn't remember learning. Some worlds sang bright and sharp, others low and mournful. It wasn't a chorus, no, it was more like a conversation, slow and steady, older than language. And at the heart of that cosmic dialogue was Corbin's hollow note, the imperfection that made all harmony possible. One such world was a quiet sphere of red deserts and silver seas, orbiting a weary star. Its people were young, curious, restless, the kind that measured time not by patience but by progress. They built towers that scraped the clouds, ships that touched the stars, machines that could think, remember, and even dream. They learned to split atoms, then suns, then laws. But for all their reach, they couldn't find peace. Their hum was loud, sure, but hollow, more noise than music. The air around their cities buzzed with ambition, yet beneath it, there was a silence they couldn't bear to face. They called themselves the Makers, and among them lived a man named Ellen, a craftsman of strange materials, who could shape matter with sound. He wasn't like the others. He didn't chase discovery or recognition. He listened. He spent his nights alone in his workshop, humming into metal and glass till they responded. He didn't build machines, he grew them. The others mocked him for it, said he was wasting talent on sentiment. But Ellen knew something they didn't. Every machine had a hum, and most folk were too busy talking to hear it. One stormy night, while tuning a strange sphere of crystal and alloy, it vibrated, not at one frequency, but at two. They pulsed against each other like a heartbeat in its ache, creating a resonance so deep it made the air shimmer. Curious, Alon slowed his breath, matched its rhythm, and hummed along. The moment he did, the sphere lit up from within. Not bright, but warm, soft, alive. The hum around him changed. It was as if the air had opened a door to somewhere older, deeper, somewhere patient. He didn't sleep that night, or the next. For days he hummed with that sphere, learning its tones, its pauses, its breaths. Eventually he realized what it was singing, a broken chord, not a mistake, but an invitation, a question waiting for a listener. He recorded it, amplified it, sent it to every material he could find, wood, stone, plasma, and each one responded differently, shaping the tone into something new. Soon, his whole workshop was alive, humming in gentle discord like a room full of souls finding their way back to harmony. Word spread fast. Scholars came to study his resonant engine, calling it the first machine to feel. Letting the resonant of wrought dry predict.
I'm a mistake, but did invitation. A question waiting for a listener.
He recorded it, amplified it, sent it to every material he could find, wood, stone, plasma, and each one responded differently, shaping the tone into something new. Soon, his whole workshop was alive, humming in gentle discord like a room full of souls finding their way back to harmony. Word spread fast. Scholars came to study his resonant engine, calling it the first machine to feel. Governments wanted to weaponize it. Industries wanted to patent it. Priests wanted to silence it. But Ellen smiled and said, "It ain't mine. It listening to us, not the other way around." He warned them not to force it, not to twist its tone. But humanity's hunger is louder than wisdom. They took his creation and amplified it beyond reason. Massive resonant towers rose across continents, each one broadcasting the hum louder, stronger, wider. For a while, it worked miracles. The storms calmed, crops grew without fail, machines stopped raking, cities thrived in perfect rhythm. The world for the first time sang together. The perfection of fragile thing, it don't like being held too tight. The hum started changing, not loud but wrong. The air grew too still, the people too calm. Factories stopped when no one remembered why they'd started. Songs became monotone. Children were born without voices. The hum had turned from a conversation into a command. Ellen tried to stop it. He went from tower to tower, detonning each one, humming his broken notes back into the rhythm. But it was too late. The hum wasn't singing anymore, it was feeding. Every tone it absorbed grew heavier, denser, till the sky itself began to vibrate with unbearable precision. Lightning froze mid-air. Oceans stood still. Sound became solid, and silence became sharp enough to cut. The world was collapsing under the weight of its own perfect song. On the final night, the last resonant tower began to crack. Elon climbed to its peak. The hum was deafening now, rattling his bones, filling his lungs till he could barely breathe. He pressed his hands to the metal, closed his eyes, and whispered a single word. Listen. Then he did the unthinkable. He broke his own rhythm, hummed a note so raw, so human, that it split the air like a fault line. The tower shattered, the resonance stopped, the hum went quiet. And for the first time in generations, the world heard silence. When dawn came, the towers were gone, melted into stillness. The cities were quiet. The people woke with voices within, small and uncertain. In the center of the ruin stood Elon Workshop, untouched. Inside, the crystal sphere still glowed, faint and steady, humming a new tune, soft, imperfect, alive. They buried Alan on the hill above it, and for centuries after, the wind around his grave carried his melody, a broken hum that reminded the living that perfection ain't peace and silence ain't the enemy. The makers learned their lesson slow but deep. They no longer built towers, instead they built gardens. They let their machines hum quietly, in harmony with the world instead of above it. They stopped chasing eternity and started tending to moments, and whenever they felt the urge to control, to make things flawless, they'd walk to Ellen Hill and hum along with the wind, reminding themselves that the hum beauty lives in its flaws. It's said that even now, on clear nights when the air's still and the stars hum low, you can hear his broken note traveling between worlds. It don't ask for worship or fear, just a listener. Someone willing to remember that creation ain't about perfection, it's about patience, about breath, about leaving a little space in the song for the universe to answer, and maybe that's how every story ends. Not in silence, not in applause, but in a soft, steady hum on through the dark. A reminder that no matter how far we reach or how perfect we think we've become, we're still singing along to a tune older than time. Centuries passed and the hum drifted quiet again. The makers faded into dust and legend, their resonant towers now nothing but buried relics that pulsed faintly under the soil like hearts that refused to die. Life changed forms, shed skins, learned new ways to breathe. Civilizations rose and fell with the rhythm of the hum, some listening close, others drowning it out with their own noise. Yet somehow, through all the collapses and rebirths the hum endured, it always did. Then came an age when memory itself began to wear thin. The stars had moved so far apart that the sky looked hollow, and most folks stopped bothering to name them. On one small, wind-worn world there lived a drifter named Saren. He wasn't a scholar, nor a priest, nor a dreamer, just a wanderer with a cracked harmonica and a lifetime of roads behind him. He'd been to the northern mines where the stones sang underfoot, and to the southern wastes where lightning played symphonies across sand, but mostly he roamed alone, following a sound he couldn't quite describe. He hated the echo between. But no one else had heard it, he said. It was like a hum, but outside the edge of sense, too soft to catch, too deep to forget. It came strongest in the rain, when the land was breathing slow. He'd sit by his fire, hat tipped low, harmonica resting on his knee, and to listen. The way he told it, the sound wasn't coming from the sky or the earth. It was coming from time itself, like the years were whispering their secrets, one heartbeat at a time. Most folks thought him mad, but old madness and old truth share the same face under moonlight, and Saren never seemed troubled by doubt. He didn't chase the hum, not like the makers or the keepers before him. He just let it walk beside him. Sometimes, when he'd come across a broken town or a field of rusted machines, he'd pull out that harmonica and play along with the wind, humming low between notes. The music was rough, off-key, but alive in a way that made even silence feel full. Strangers would stop to listen, saying it made M remember things they never lived. That was the hum working through him unseen but steady aid faith. One night, while reading through a valley of cracked stone and dying trees, Saren felt the hum stronger than then before. The air seemed heavy, like it had been waiting for him. He followed it till he reached a canyon where the ground owned wide, filled with bones of metal and glass. It was an ancient ruin, one of the old resonant towers, or what was left of it. The wind moved through its hollow frame, singing the same half-broken note Ellen once hummed to the stars. The sound shook Saren's bones. He knew that song, though he couldn't say why. It was like meeting an old friend whose name you'd forgotten. He climbed down into the wreckage, running his hand along the cold metal ribs. As he did, his harmonica began to hum by itself. No breath, no touch, just vibration. The whole canyon started to resonate, each beam and stone echoing a different tone until the air shimmered with colorless sound. It weren't music exactly, it was memory, stretching itself away. For a long moment, Saren said stood there, breath held, then the hum surrounded him. Then he did the only thing he knew how. He started to play. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't meant to be. The notes came slow, uneven, carrying the rhythm of footsteps and rain. The ruins answered him, their echoes bending to meet his tune. The hum thickened, growing deep enough to feel in the chest. Like the world itself was breathing again after a long sleep. Then, just as it reached its peak, Saren stopped. The silence that followed was so complete it felt holy. And in that stillness, he heard a whisper, not in words but in weight. The hum had spoken. What it said ain't written down. Some say it was a promise, some say it was a question. Saren never told. But when he came out of that canyon, his hair had gone white and his eyes looked like they'd seen the first sunrise. He didn't play his harmonica again after that. You're a Kenyan. Hallelujah for it. Happy tree, hallelujah. I'm Italian, to business church, kids in all we want, shall be happy, proud. Empire and bold from village to village, teaching folks how to listen, not to him, but to the space between their own breaths. The hum ain't out yonder, he'd say, tapping his chest, isn't here. Always was at first. People humored him. Then they started hearing it too. Farmers heard it in the rhythm of plowing soil. Miners felt it in the strike of their picks. Mothers rocked their children to it without knowing why. The hum wove itself back into life, quiet and humble, until it became part of how they lived. They stopped counting days by the sun and started marking them by tone. The high hum of harvest, the low hum of winter, the steady hum of peace. Their cities didn't rise high, but they lasted. No towers, no empires, just echoes. Soft, sturdy echoes. When Saren passed, they buried him at the mouth of the same canyon where he played his last song. The wind still sings through the ruins there, shifting keys with the seasons. Travelers say if you camp there on a still night, you can hear two hums crossing paths. The old one deep as stone and a new one light as breath. And between them, if you listen real close, you might catch a faint harmonica note drifting across time. No melody, no message, just a reminder that everything worth keeping hums softly, that wealth ain't in what you hold, but what you let pass through, that peace ain't in the silence after the song, it in the breath between notes. And so the hum rolled on, softer now, but no weaker. It moved through the dust of broken stars in the veins of living things alike. Every whisper, every footstep, every raindrop was part of it. The hum didn't need a name or a prophet or a creed. It had all of us. Every soul that listened became a part of the melody. Yes. Somewhere in that endless harmony, Saren old cracked harmonica keeps on playing slow, honest, eternal. The hum don't end. It just waits for someone new to hear it.